It's July 20th. It's decided for the next 2 weeks our students will be spending their time here on a deserted island. It was said on a cloudless night, a view from here would be one to take your very breath away. Whether it's chatting with your friends or sitting shoulder to shoulder with a special someone on your mind, just making memories of your youth. A true fantasy, I'd say too. But this is COTE. We don't have these fairy tales, nor fantasies. This trip isn't your little fun campfire sing-along. It's much more. For students of the advanced nurturing high school, this island would be the home of their next major exam. Will their luck hold up? Or will it finally run out? Well, it's time to find out. Let's open to Classroom Elite, Year 2, Volume 3. It's been a while. Let's get it. In terms of size, the students were told this island would be considerably bigger than the former. And that was true. Hirata spoke up beside Kiyotaka, repeating the fact that Mashima-sensei said the island would be huge. They only have 2 weeks, but they were sure that some students will have to retire at some point. There was a high chance of this. Even when on the ship, you could feel the scorching heat of the summer sun. Hirata's concerns were right on the mark. They would have to stay cautious of heat stroke and dehydration. The ship drew closer and closer to the island, but now the full extent of the situation was becoming clear. Instead of circling around the island, the ship seemed to head straight for one of the ports. No easy mode this time, I guess, huh? The countdown until the start of the exam was getting closer. Despite Hirata's soft, calm expression, his hands were clenched onto the deck's railing. This exam wouldn't be easy. Over the next 2 weeks, the entire student body will receive a massive change. Some classes would rise, and some classes would fall. And even worse, the fate of expulsion was a possibility for some students. Finally, an announcement was heard throughout the ship for the students to prepare. Kiyotaka chose to ask Hirata a question, that being if he had resolved himself, his tone being strong and serious. Hirata mentioned that he put forth every effort to make sure he had no regrets. After all, it's the only thing he could do for his class. You see, it's not like Hirata wanted someone to get expelled. It's just, this time around, there was no way Class D could avoid taking any casualties. Not this time. Now, I want to highlight something about Hirata's growth to be exact. Of course, he's anxious about the whole exam in general, but it really seems like he's grown and, well, he's prepared for someone to get expelled. He would have to face it in this situation. He couldn't fall into despair again. A hard path he's taken, but one could say it's necessary. Let's go back to the day July 19th, the day before the students arrived on the island, 12:36 PM to be exact. On the unpopular deck of the ship, none other than the best girl, Kei Karuizawa, Kiyotaka's girlfriend to be exact, signaled him over with a wave of her hand. After making sure nobody was around, they stood side by side each other and looked out towards the sea. It was said the illumination of the sun on the water's surface made it sparkle like a studded jewel. Even Kei said the view was amazing as she looked out into the ocean. A sense of romance encased in her gaze. Kiyotaka asked if she saw it already last year. Kei replied saying she saw a bit of it, but the view wasn't as important as the thing she's doing now, like hanging out with friends. She was slightly embarrassed, but Kiyotaka understood. He knew for many students it was their first time aboard a luxury cruise. So of course, rather than sitting back and taking in the nice view, he would rather explore the facilities, what the ship has to offer. Kei, unable to settle her nerves, asked if it was really okay for them to be on a date in the open. Kiyotaka, unsure if anyone would see them, feels like it was okay for the time being. Every year group would have a briefing session. For the second year, it would be at 1 PM. So right now was one of the only times the couple could be alone together. Kei mentioned that there wasn't so many students this year, and this was perhaps why they had to explain things before getting on the island. That was part of it, but not the only reason. They probably didn't want to hold an explanation out on the beach due to the heat. You know, even under the direct sunlight, many students could collapse from heat stroke. This was a risk the school couldn't take. Kei said it didn't feel real. Not talking about the whole situation the year is in, but it didn't feel real that she was dating the man ayanokoji Kiyotaka. She added he was so smart but misses the mark about these kind of things. Just sighing. And then asked a question. How about you, Kiyotaka? Does it feel real to you? The boy himself did not know, and said he wondered. It does and it doesn't. The heck? Kei replied. The fact these two were dating was an unshakable fact, but you could say there haven't been many visible developments in their relationship. Kei mentioned the thought of her never being able to imagine the two of them would meet up in secret like this. Well, I guess, replied Kiyotaka, as Kei sighed looking out into the distant horizon. Bruh, I feel so bad for my girl Kei sometimes. Like, come on, just love my girl Kiyotaka. Soon after, Kiyotaka mentioned that depending on what they would be told in the brief, then he may need her to do some things. Kiyotaka then told her this was his primary motive for calling her out here. They were allowed to use their phones for the rest of the day, but Kiyotaka felt physically meeting up together just because they were dating was a truly different experience. A little after this chat, they heard an announcement that the first year's briefing was now over. Kei too mentioned that they couldn't be spotted together, so she'll head off first. Now in the briefing room, there was those who took a seat at random and those who sat with their closest friends. Since Kiyotaka was alone, he weaved through many groups and found a place to sit. The seat he chose wasn't at the front, but near the back. All of a sudden, he was met with a voice. Ugh, why the hell are you sitting here? By all the chances in the world, who was Kiyotaka next to again? That's right, Ibuki Mio from class 2B. How many times will my boy run into baby girl Mio? At this point, I just feel like, happy for all you Mio shippers, huh? She asked if he sat there on purpose. Not at all, he replied. She got up and tried to go elsewhere, but looking left to right, she knew groups have already began chatting amongst each other. Trying to go for a last resort, looking for somewhere else to sit, one seat away from Kiyotaka to be in fact, her luck ran out, as she was too late, as the seat was taken by another student. She had no choice but to suck it up and sit next to Kiyotaka. They both turned their attention to the theater. Just like last year was Mashima-sensei in charge of the explanation. He explained the rules of the exam, and they were all excited to spend 2 weeks on the island, but added they must know some things. With this, a screen in the theater turned on, attracting the attention of nearly 160 students in the room. Uninhabited Island Special Exam Overview. For 2 weeks, groups would compete with each other to earn points in a survival exam. In the event that all members of a group retire during the exam, the group in question will immediately be disqualified. All points earned prior to disqualification will be invalidated and the group's ranking will be finalized immediately. Map of the island was then shown, of where they'll be competing. There were 2 ways to score points. One was basic movement, where you'd be directed to go to 100 cells within the map. For example, let's say you start at D9 and your designated area was C8. Then the first 3 groups to make it would get the early bird bonus. First would get 10 points, second would get 5, and the third would get 3 points. As for everybody else, they would receive 1 point. The designated area for the basic movement rule will change 3 times a day on the first and the last day of the exam, but on the last 12 days of the exam it will change 4 times a day. Groups that fail to arrive in the designated area 3 times in a row will be penalized, but when that group breaks the chain, the penalty counter will be reset to 0. The students will be required to wear a digital watch. This tracks blood pressure, heart rate, sleep cycle, and even stress levels, and even more actually. If these measurements go over a certain level, it will sound a warning alert. The school will closely be watching these levels continuously. These watches also track location. The reason for this is that if a student was in danger, an emergency alert will sound off, and a medical team would come rushing to your location. This watch is pretty high tech, even being able to tell if you removed it forcefully, making it hard for anyone to cheat. Students can earn points by competing in tasks set up throughout the island. They can take place at any time between 7 AM to 5 PM, and they'll be spread out throughout the island. On the first day of the exam, they will appear at 10 AM, and on the final day, they will stop appearing at 3 PM. These tasks will be split into 3 general categories, and it'll be possible for the same task to show up more than once. The categories are as followed: 40 for academic ability, 30 physical ability, and 30 other. The appearance time for the tasks will be unpredictable, and in order to find the status of a given task, groups will have to travel to said location. Depending on the task, if a student does successfully complete it, they may be rewarded points, or even the chance to increase their group size. Listening to all of this, Kiyotaka felt the exam was pretty simple, thinking of it as just basic movement and tasks to rack up points. Some of all the explanation, a certain man came onto the stage, that being the acting director Tsukishiro. For a slight second he was surveying his school year in the audience, with his visual faint smile spread across his slender face. Giving an introduction, he stopped for a second and locked eyes in Kiyotaka's direction for a fraction of a second, his slight pause going unnoticed by the school year. He carried on and went on to the topic involving boys and girls. That topic, well, being sexual misconduct, saying the school will not hesitate to give severe penalties including immediate expulsion. He carried on adding if they judge it's done with malicious intent, then the police will be involved. The boy Tsukishiro didn't say outright, but basically was telling the boys to keep the snake in their pants. He decided to add another thing, something that would not only bring a strong reaction for the students, but from the staff too. He talked about how the shortage of food and water could lead to altercations between the students. And when it comes to these said disputes, his personal policy is to look away, at least to a certain extent. Mashima-sensei would come closer and whisper something in his ear. Kiyotaka made a guess that this had something to do with Mashima telling Tsukishiro not to say that. Right after this, boy Tsukishiro outright said aloud what Mashima told him, saying that he was told to retract his statement, but continued saying he wouldn't do that. And if he had to give a reason, it's because there'll be no way the students will have zero friction between them. Although it's not something he's endorsing, he's simply looking past the occasional disputes. You could say the students will be challenged in a way, being granted freedom but with some drawbacks at the same time. With this, Tsukishiro passed back the stage to Mashima and made his exit. Mashima then went to talk about the various goods they could buy. These items were on stage. Mentioned they'll receive a base amount of 5,000 points, and said they were free to use these points to buy anything listed in the catalog. Students that had the Head Start card would receive an additional 2,500 points. The catalogs were then handed out in the crowd. The students will have from now to 6 AM tomorrow morning to buy things, or they could save points for later, at the shop that would be set up at the island's starting point. But they had to keep in mind those items would be double the price. Also at the starting point there would be restrooms and showers. Damn, I thought they'd have to like shit in the forest or something, but I guess that's good. Things like toothbrush, shirts, and underwear will be given for free. And from the looks of things, everything it had to do with hygiene the school was being pretty generous about. Kiyotaka took a closer look at what they could buy. It had things from food and water to fashionable swimsuits and flotation rings. Quite the difference. I guess the school wants students to have much fun as possible, trying not to torture them too much, huh? You could say the more people in your group, the more cost-effective things would be, splitting costs for different things. Now on to another thing, students will be given a small tablet. This will provide a map of the island, but would allow students to check their next designated area, and their own at the same time. This tablet would be a good way to view task locations, along with detailed rewards info. And from the 4th day to the end of the exam, the students will be able to view the group member list and the scores for all of the top and bottom ranked groups. And from the 6th day, a GPS search function will be unlocked, allowing users to view the current locations of all the other students. If a tablet battery is to run out, students may charge it at the starting point, or a specific other locations on the map. Kiyotaka thought it would be safer to buy an external battery. He thought it would be fatal if you couldn't use the tablet. A number of other factors came into this, and of course our boy Kiyotaka is going to think of them in every single detail. After all of this, Mashima turned off the microphone, signaling the end of the presentation. Students began to gather in front of each other, checking out these items. Kiyotaka on the other hand didn't have the courage to jump into the crowd, and wondered if Ibuki felt the same way as he did. She then noticed Kiyo and snapped, asking him what was up. Kiyotaka engaged a conversation saying they both have, well, different personalities, or make it tough jumping into a crowd. Ibuki went to question this, saying don't lump her in with him, and added she can jump into a crowd if she wanted to. Mio was well displeased to say the least. All of a sudden a loud sound came in front of the room. It was Isizaki from class 2B, who was struggling to stand up straight. While wearing the largest backpack, his knees were even wobbling. Ishizaki stuffed the backpack with tons of bottles of water. This wasn't such a good idea, as you have to really think about how mobile you can be during this exam. Kiyotaka broke down the rules of the exam in his head, going through everything again from the beginning. He thought about how the rankings would play out, and how he would make a comprehensive call, and chose what he needed for the exam. Now 8:30 in the morning, the ship was slowly in the docking process, meaning the students were finally able to begin the exam. A total of 157 groups would be taking part if you included all the combinations. Out of all of these groups, 5 would be expelled. The students would have to gather their classmates. You could sense the tense atmosphere. The starting point for all the students was D9. They would listen to announcements from the teachers as they waited to leave the ship. The students set foot on the island. The clock was about to hit 9 in the morning, as the last of the first years left the ship. First year students were allowed to step foot on the island before the rest, probably to give them a slight advantage. Class D would have the biggest disadvantage, as A class would go first and as followed. The total time difference was about 15 to 30 minutes. If you took into account the travel time, then well, this was a pretty harsh setback. Horikita then greeted Kiyotaka, asking if he slept well. Like normal, I guess, he replied, asking her a question back, asking how she was and if she was feeling sick. A little callback to last year's island exam. Even Horikita knew this, and asked if Kiyotaka was criticizing her, saying he wasn't and was just messing with her. She meant that he was carefree considering the situation. Kiyotaka thought to himself there was no point in getting so worked up at this point, and said it would just be a waste of energy, and also asked Horikita if she had heard about the 3rd year student who got sick. She had, and was thankful it wasn't someone in her own class. If he felt ill at the start of the exam, he would be eliminated, but thankfully he was in a 3-person group, so all he had to do was pray that his teammates could make it through. The first years were almost finished, leaving the 2nd years to come next. Every student went to go check the tablet of the first designated area. For Kiyotaka it was D7, as for Horikita it was F9, with 2 being in different tables. There was a total of 12 tables. Kiyotaka thought he had to keep gaining points one by one, even if he didn't break the top 3. He wanted to avoid a situation where random designated areas kept popping up. Horikita said to Kiyotaka she wouldn't worry about him, and just asked that he gets a high ranking. Oh, Suzuka's for our boy, you love to see it. At least that's what I hope it is. Kiyotaka asked her not to overdo it, and she would take this as welcomed advice. Judging from the girl's tone, she found this questionable, but didn't seem too worried. Horikita now knew what her limits were, unlike last year. You could see the first years setting off onto the island, beginning their long journey. The 2nd and 3rd years would soon do the same. First they had to head to the designated areas. None of the groups seemed to be in a rush, noticed Horikita. There would be no point in competing over the first designated area. If they decided to close the gap between the 1st years, then it would only consume stamina. While the two were talking, a young Giga Chad walked past. Kiyotaka saw his face for just a moment, seeing a big grin painted on it. That man was none other than Konji. They talked about if he would be serious during this exam. Kiyotaka thought it would be a 50-50 chance. After all, he made a deal with Horikita that if he didn't get 1st place, he would cooperate with her in future special exams. Even Kiyotaka wanted to pay attention to how Konji performed in this special exam. Just a little while after, Kiyotaka realized he hadn't seen any of the 3rd year students yet. When he turned back to look, they started to make their way there. But there was no sign of Nagamo or Miyabi. While Kiyotaka was looking for him, many of the third year students had caught up and started to overtake him. He was then called out by one of them, that being Fuka Kiryun. She added if there was anything he wanted to know, she would tell him. Kiyotaka declined her very offer and changed the topic. She had asked what his first designated area was. D7, Kiyotaka replied, the two having the very same destination. Kiryun was pleased and a smile appeared across her face, and asked if Kiyotaka was coming with. No, giving the excuse he doesn't think he could keep up with her pace. Kiryun would soon know if this was a lie or not. After a while, there was no sign of Nagamo. Several minutes after Kiryun's departure, Kiyotaka decided to make his own way towards the designated area. Taking into account the point factor of the exam, Kiyotaka took out his tablet and opened the map. He decided to measure every space from north to south and east and west, calculating how long it should take to reach the designated area, going as far to calculate his speed, that being 80 meters per minute on foot. The fact that he's able to calculate something like this, what's pretty strange in my opinion, is pretty crazy. It shows the depth of his mind and the next level of the White Room. This student is just crazy. Couldn't imagine a normal MC doing this, that's for sure. Well, it doesn't stop there. We're taking into account things like uphill and downhill travel, the elevation of the island from sea level. Pretty much every factor he's taken into account. How do you beat this man? He made detailed mental notes on how he traveled, along with how long it took him to reach each spot. A while after, Kiyotaka's path was no longer flat. You could see thick overgrown trees start to close in as he entered the woods. And just like he's anticipated, it would be difficult to keep going in a straight path. As you took a look around, you could see things like large spider webs probably spun by huge spiders. You can only imagine the students who had fears of insects and their horror trying to trek through this island. Not only that, but the manual telling the students to watch out for wild animals. If it wasn't a flex enough, Kiyotaka stated that even if he didn't have his tablet, the odds of him getting lost would be slim. In his point of view, you could see many groups make it there through the woods, along with hearing voices behind him. Following the groups behind him would also be a lower risk of getting injured and swarmed by bugs or something else. This really showcases Kiyotaka's survival skill on the outside and makes you question some of the things he did in the White Room overall. What kind of training was this kid put through? What kind of training was he put through to survive and gain the skills for a situation like this? He then spotted the ayanokoji group, Airi, Akito, and Haruka a little bit ahead. He got closer and inserted himself into the conversation, asking if they were talking about the next area they were heading to. Almost at the same time, all three nodded in unison. First area was D8. Kiyotaka was one space north, that being D7. Haruka stated that a bunch of students already got there, but a point is still a point. Well, that is a good point. Nice pun, right? I'll stop. Airi began to mumble quietly, sounding a little bit disappointed, saying that if they were on the same table, they could have been together. Kiyotaka thought it was a little bit surprising. The fact that you can be in a separate group, there are many ways you could cooperate with each other, such as share food or even borrow equipment. This did come with a danger though. That being the more groups together at once would be the more difficult for everyone to keep up with each other. Before leaving, Haruka stated it would be nice if they could meet up later down the road and chill for a while, wishing him a farewell as she watched him go. Soon after, Kiyotaka arrived at his area and heard a quiet beep, that being the notification showing he was given a point for his arrival. We were able to adjust the volume on the watch, but decided not to for now. Each area when looked at on the map didn't look too big, but when you were there and started to walk around, you could really see how big it really was. I would think so too. After all, the whole school is supposed to be on this island, so I guess it comes in handy. Although Kiyotaka couldn't spot anyone for now, he was sure that there was others within the area. He was then greeted by none other than his kohai, Nanase Tsubasa from Class 1D. Although she was not with her group, that being Ichika and Hosen, he decided to ask about that, questioning that groups should stick together. She replied saying the two were investigating the area, so they decided to split up. The girl Nanase was still a mystery to Kiyotaka. He knew not to stick around longer than needed and told he had to get going. She mentioned it would be difficult for him, being all alone, and asked him to take care. It took him 50 minutes in total to arrive at the area he's currently at. The next location wouldn't be shown for the next 3 hours. But tasks will start appearing before long. Around 10 AM he was able to see 14 tasks in total. One red dot appeared in the left corner of D7. You can see some students heading northwest towards a task, that being a building a fire, where 5 points would be given for the first group to build a fire with the tasks given. Some other tasks listed in the area included an English test in the center of E7 and a geography test around D8. The registration period for all of the tasks was said to be 60 minutes, but they were shortly to fill up quick. Around C6 there was another test being grip strength examination. Registration period on this was set to 2 hours long. After around 40 minutes, Kiyotaka arrived at the task within C6 and was greeted by Class 2C's homeroom teacher Hoshinomiya sensei. She told him he was a little late and registration filled up about 5 minutes ago. Bro, if I traveled 40 minutes to be late by 5, I would be so pissed. We all know how Hoshinomiya is. And of course she tried to keep Kiyotaka here as she was bored and wanted someone to talk to. Even Kiyotaka knew this and called her out saying if he wanted her to stay, she would have to take responsibility for him missing out on the early bird bonus. As he said that, she let go of his arm instantly and made distance between them. Even still, she insisted on continuing the conversation. She wanted to talk about the end of term exams. She had her eye on the boy and keeps seeing these little glimpses of his power, from the sports festival to the final special exam, and with the first test, the perfect math score. One can't help but be interested. Hoshinomiya brought up the fact that Kiyotaka is getting a lot of attention lately. Then Hoshinomiya began to speak about the math score, and how even she couldn't solve some of the questions that easily. Kiyotaka understood from her point of view, as a rival to Chabashira. This continued on for a while, and I gotta say, goddamn, I've never seen Hoshinomiya talk this much. She must be pissed about the existence of Kiyotaka, or well, the fact that he's in Class D. Kiyotaka tried to backpedal his way out of the situation, and mentioned how there was a few students who could solve these questions. But what class is Kiyotaka in? Class D. She knew it was a mean thing to say, but that class is full of defective students, and full of so-called problem children. A class like this shouldn't include someone like Kiyotaka. It's something hard to accept. But when you think about Class D, it really is the low of the low. Bottom of the barrel if you will. Everyone sees it as that. They're full of trash and full of defects. So having an extraordinary student within that class is almost impossible to accept. It probably doesn't make sense, nor feel real to someone like Hoshinomiya. But times are changing, and you can even say that's a bad way of thinking, at least in her case. If you look at Class 2D and even 1D, you see some students who aren't all that bad, and some high level ones. Like Horikta, for example. Hoshinomiya knew this, but didn't think it was anywhere near enough to bring that class together. Her main impression was that Kiyotaka himself changed his surroundings. He even had to question this in his head, realizing that Hoshinomiya may have gathered more information of Class 2D without him knowing. Her back was against the wall, at least that's how she felt. It was her first time she ever dropped down to Class C. Things were breaking down for her. That very woman who dreams of reaching Class A with her current group was openly disappointed, but had some strange kind of hope, I guess. An idea she would call revolutionary. She asked Kiyotaka if he would come over to her class, like Katsuraki did with Class B. Something Kiyotaka thought wasn't really revolutionary at all, and even someone like Ishizaki could have come up with this. Damn. Why would boy Ishizaki catching strays? Should have been Ike instead, huh? She asked this once again and offered her hand to him. Hoshinomiya was the type of woman to use her physical contact with the opposite sex as one of her weapons, at least in Kiyotaka's eyes. Right before they touched, the shook of her hand recalled Kiyotaka's earlier warning. She shook her head and held back. Kiyotaka wouldn't be able to get 20 million points even if he saved up until graduation day. At this stage, it would be better for both of them to wait until the very last minute and see how all of this plays out. It was cold, but what Kiyotaka was saying had some truth. There's no guarantee that any class would stay in Class A, so swapping now, you couldn't really tell how things would go. You'd have to have the utmost confidence that stack class in terms of adaptability to make sure you can reach Class A by the end of the third year. One of the students was taking the grip test. That was Sudo, to be exact. Who changed a ton, even Hoshinomiya questioned how it made this happen. The key factor for this was, well, serving his master, Horikta. Without her, you could say Sudo would have stayed the same. With the event now finished, Kiyotaka gave his farewell. She had hoped in the next 2 weeks they could run into each other again. That's how she felt. But for a boy, it was a different story. Personally, in his mind, he didn't want to see her again. At all. Kiyotaka began to move again. He was unable to go to task locations due to them being full up so quick. So he made his way back to the designated area and he was able to score 1 point at B7. And once again at D7. The total points he had earned on the first day was only 3 points. This would definitely put him in the bottom groups. But in this moment in time, it was still the first day, so no need to be worried. If Kiyotaka pushed his luck, he would waste a lot of energy and maybe consume a lot of his water. He decided to prepare for the next day, but once again bumped into his kohai, Nanase Tsubasa. Quite a coincidence at this point, and once again she was alone. No Hosen nor Ichigo was with her. Nanase's group was able to score 13 points in total today. A smooth start, Kiyotaka would say. Nanase didn't actually make it to one of the designated areas, but made up for this by completing a task. But if she was to miss out, it wouldn't matter much as her group could cover it. The two's conversation wasn't really a conversation and more like a report on what was happening to each of them in the day. They headed their separate ways and Kiyotaka decided to walk out into the forest where he would camp. He thought about the temperature to get the right spot. From D7 he went east to the boundary of D7 and E7. The island was so huge you could go hours without seeing anyone at all. Kiyotaka found a place to set up camp and did so. He sat down and began to strategize and review what happened today. He ran through the task today and saw what ones offered water and started to calculate. He wasn't the only one thinking about points, but resources too. What was his best possible method for making it through these 2 weeks? From the second day onwards, he would focus on getting points and supplies. Now the middle of the night, Kiyotaka had woken up. It was pitch dark. Couldn't even see 1 inch in front of your face. The only things you could hear were the buzz of insects and the sound of things scouring through the grass. Imagine having to go out alone at this time. That shit would have me shook. Kiyotaka sat inside his tent with a bated breath. He knew the most worrying part of the exam was none other than Shikishiro. What was the best possible way to get Kiyotaka expelled was the question in mind. What would you do in Tsukishiro's shoes? Kiyotaka thought Tsukishiro could use the White Room student to force an injury. If he had to suffer a grave injury, the school would probably be able to determine it was caused by another party, but the White Room student's skills can make an injury look like an accident. What method would Tsukishiro use? We have to wait and find out. Now 6:30 in the morning, Kiyotaka awakes once again. He could tell it was going to be a sunny day. His choice on picking a spot away from the direct sunlight was the right call. He started his day with a light breakfast and some water and waited for 7 o'clock to roll around. Reaching the designated areas would be Kiyotaka's priority, but he decided if a task was to appear nearby, he would consider shifting his motive, depending on the contents and rewards of course. Now 7, he had to move. Currently at D7, his first goal of the day was E8, the closest spot to where he set up camp. On the first day, Kiyotaka has spent observing, but from today onwards he would pick up the pace, bit by bit. A short while after he received a notification saying he had come first place, alerting him he had received 10 points, completely making up for yesterday's mishap in one swoop. He would then wait for tasks to show up. The next area he set to go was E6, in which he came second place and earned 5 points. And the third area was F7, yet again our boy's streak continues with second place once again. He had a total of 3 points on the first day, and today with 23 it would total up to 26 whole points. Not bad at all. But you have to think about the multiple person groups who would have this much racked up just by arrival bonuses. Kiyotaka may have gotten second place twice, but he didn't see it like this. Instead he saw it as failing to get first place twice. Damn, that's like the heavy fucking mindset there, ain't it? He didn't know who it was, but he thought it would have been a powerful foe in his table. He decided to return to E6 and wait for tasks to appear. Once again, he would come face to face with nanase for the third time, and guess what? She was alone. She asked if their tables were overlapping, and that very well could be the case. What concern Kiyotaka had is how often they were bumping into each other. Let's take it like this. Out of all the students on this huge island, where it said you could go hours without seeing a soul, Kiyotaka has managed to see the same person 3 times within 2 days. For now, we'll rule it off as a coincidence, but thought if that really is the case. She then asked a strange request, that being if she could accompany him. Her group of Ichigo and Hosen had been acting independently. Nanase was worried if she would have to act alone and may not reach her designated areas. I thought Kiyotaka had been reaching his really quickly, so she wanted to partner up. Instead, she would only step foot in areas after he did, and if there's a task involving one person, she will let him take the spot. Something this ridiculous, Kiyotaka thought. It really didn't benefit her at all. Kiyotaka tried to get her to back off, and mentioned if she was able to keep up with his pace. He was a little distrusting of her, and rightfully so. A very group involving Nanase, Hosen, and Ichika plotted to expel him. After thinking about it all, realizing there would be no way to get her to back off, he decided to let her join him. Nanase thanked him, smiling happily, and bowed her head deeply. Now together they decided to head for a quick task under F8. Kiyotaka wanted to aim for another task at E5, but that path was more of a challenge than the one at now. Stepping foot in F8, Kiyotaka decided to partake. Nanase mentioned the fact that he wanted to partake in the task at E5, but didn't because of her, and reassured him not to deviate from what he would normally do. Kiyotaka knew this, and mentioned the quiz would be better in terms of rewards anyway. Tsudo was also have a task, and shouted at Kiyotaka, mentioning there's only 3 spots left. With that, they ran over and registered. There were 30 minutes until the deadline, so they waited around. Some other students were waiting too, such as Ike, who wasn't smiling at all, and just staring off into space, looking out of it. Bro, lack of brain cells, can't even be focused while doing nothing, huh? Kiyotaka spoke with Tsudo and asked how each other were doing. Mentioned Ike was feeling down, but always avoids the question when asked about it. Kiyotaka thought this was probably due to seeing Ohara. He decided to give Tsudo some words, saying if they work together then he's sure to have no trouble when coming out on top. Tsudo then noticed Nanase and pulled Kiyotaka shoulder to shoulder, asking what was up. He said they're on the same table and she's working with Hosen and is a dangerous move. It was his own way of saying he was worried, and asked if he had any trouble to give him a shout. But then, he let it go. Now starting a quiz, a multiple choice one to be exact, the question appeared on the tablet, along with a category. Category? Anime. Let's go, boys. It asked what was the correct title for episode 13 of the series Mobile Samurai Bomb Them. But personally, if they had an anime quiz, I would ace this. But poor Kiyotaka, I'm not even sure if they had any anime in the White Room. Probably not, I don't know, y'all tell me. Even if he knew this wasn't his area of expertise, there was a 25% chance anyway. The question continued, and yet again another anime one. Kiyotaka wasn't going to do well here at all, and realized this task was a waste of time. With the task finished, Kiyotaka managed to get the score 25%, and even Nanase had a tough time. It was safe to say she knew nothing about anime either. You could hear Tsudo and Hondo celebrating. As for Ike, he just stood there, and hardly took part in their group high five. Kiyotaka wondered about Ike and the Shinohara situation. Wondered if Tsudo was the right person to support Ike right now. Sure, he's grown as a person, but could he really provide the care Ike needs right now? Nanase probably noticed Kiyotaka and asked if something was up. and went on further asking if there was a problem with Pseudo's group. Kiyotaka replied, asking at a glance what does their group look like as someone who doesn't know them. Kiyotaka would describe Ike and Hondo as the life of a party. But right now Ike doesn't appear to be full of any of that life. Even Nanase saw this and asked if something was wrong. They continued this topic for a little bit longer. Kiyotaka thought about how the balancing in Pseudo's group was poor, before the exam at least, but for now things were going well. And even stated that if Ike was in his peak, he may have been the dark horse in his exam. I feel like the author been watching me, you know, like just watching me hate on Ike in every video. And now like in this volume, they're gonna be like, no, we're gonna give Ike some big moments. Give me a big fuck you, huh? True pain, if I do say so myself. Now time to leave. Nanase once again reiterates not to take her being into account, and as for Kiyotaka to do what he would normally do. Kiyotaka obviously once again stated he's not going to take her to account, so not to worry. The next location they were heading to was I-7. If Kiyotaka wanted to take the shortest route, he would have to cross over the mountains. But the fact that Seth dropped so casual, like what the fuck, crossing mountains? How big are we talking here? He then asked Nanase to show him his tablet, and after all they were in the same table. With that established, Kiyotaka opted by finishing off the day with tasks within G8 and G9. As for Cappy, he decided to stick close to H9. Gave his farewell to Pseudo, whose next area was H9. Said if he was okay with it, they should meet up later in camp. Kiyotaka saw this as unexpected, but not a bad thing. With that, they agreed on a time around 5:30. Since it was hard to meet up in the woods, they opted to meet in the beach by G9. He asked Nanase if there was a problem with spending the night with Pseudo, and she was fine with it, and saw this as a good opportunity to talk with some of them. Skipping to around 5:30, Kiyotaka and Nanase were waiting at the beach. Pseudo was now here appeared, and he was taking things too fast, even something he would admit to himself. You could see he was out of breath. Sure, Pseudo was athletic, but carrying around a demotivated Ike might not bode too well. Along with Hondo as well, who was also stated to be gasping for breath. They decided to head off and go back to H9. Again, you can see the effects of Ike not being the same. Even Nanase didn't understand the impression of his high spirits from before. He had a lot on his mind. As of this time at least, it was best not to pressure the boy. After they had finished eating, it was around 8 o'clock and the sun had begun to set and night had come. Nanase and Hondo began to speak and share a laugh. Pseudo was laying down and gave a blunt response from time to time. Even Hondo noticed this fact and asked him what was up. Pseudo replied saying it's nothing, but not to trust Nanase. And continued saying he's stating facts. But Hondo didn't understand. Nanase then interjected saying she did something horrible to Pseudo in the past. Hondo tried to pry a little bit more and wondered if it was something wild like Pseudo trying to sexual harass Nanase. He was dumbfounded and questioned if Hondo really thinks he would do that. Hondo said no, and says he's completely devoted to Horikta, and continued asking what else it could be. Pseudo turned around and mentioned it wasn't something he could possibly talk to him about. Which is pretty fair. If you know the true situation, which we all do, it's pretty reasonable for Pseudo to act this way. He then shifted their attention to Ike, saying he wasn't acting like himself. Ike wouldn't budge, and pinned it on being nervous. Pseudo wouldn't have it and said that he was excited when they were told about the exam. Even Nanase mentioned, even though they just met, she gets the impression he's feeling down. They continued to pressure Ike and he still wouldn't budge. But after some time, he finally decided to budge. He mentioned some girl was on his mind. Hondo was shocked and pressured asking who. Normally you would think someone like Kushida or Ichinose, but for Ike that was not the case. The girl on his mind was Shinohara Satsuki, he said. Both Pseudo and Hondo couldn't wrap their heads around this, and went to mention they were saying they always hate each other. They continued to talk about this a little more and mentioned she's in a group with Komiya, who probably has a crush on her too. Ike felt helpless and he didn't know what to do. She was with another guy, while he's here in the friend zone. Bro, this is like kind of painful even for me. Like, I feel bad for Ike low-key. Kiyotaka even knew it was impossible to know how the other person felt deep down. It was something he experienced firsthand when he asked out Kei. Nanase gave him some advice, hoping he would make things clear and spitting facts. Ike was unable to reply. He knew she was right. Nanase began to cry. It would appear Ike touched her heart through this situation. Even Pseudo started panicking despite being wary of Nanase. Ike then apologized for all of this, saying sorry to Pseudo. Kiyotaka couldn't even tell if Nanase's tears were acting or her getting caught up in the moment. Who really knows the truth, aside from her? Around 6 in the morning, Kiyotaka heard a voice. It was Nanase waking him up. She was worried about Ike. More importantly, worried if she said too much the night before. Bro, she like waking me up at 6 in the morning to talk about this? Bro, like I would bitch slap her. Like, let me sleep, woman. It wasn't that her alone said too much, but overall a lot was said. Kiyotaka reassured her that Ike probably would have appreciated this. But what Nanase was worried about was not how he took the words. To be exact, she was worried about her words, and how they would make Ike act, and maybe do something reckless. She felt uneasy to split apart from Pseudo's group due to this. Kiyotaka understood. After all, Ike's mental state in this current point wasn't the best at all. Along with that, there were additional thoughts in Kiyotaka's head. The question could be asked, was Nanase's reason for doing this stemming from a real worry, or did she have another motive? This idea wasn't dismissed, it was also thought as a weak play. They decided to wait and see what their designated area was. If it was a completely different, they would give up on this idea of sticking together. Kiyotaka and Nanase's destination was H7. While this wasn't the worst thing ever, it wasn't exactly ideal. If they walked for 2 hours, they would only end up reaching I7 or I8 at best. It wasn't impossible to reach H7, but that's for Kiyotaka. For Nanase, it may be a different story. As for Sudo's area, it was I8. Although different, their routes will follow the same path. But for Kiyotaka, this could also be seen as a downside, as if he tried to get Sudo's group at his own pace, then well, this probably wouldn't play out too well. In the end, he decided to go with Sudo's group. You could feel the effects of last night from Ikke's embarrassment in his speech. Along with that, you could also say Nanase's presence was pushing Ikke forward. Not only that, but the usual Ikke would be hitting on Nanase, calling her cute. Nothing of the sorts is happening here right now. This could also be a sign that Ikke was starting to change, or at least trying his best. There are a lot of thoughts going through Kiyotaka's head as Ikke and the others walked ahead. First of all, you could tell the man in front of him, Ikke, was full of life, at least much more than the day prior. Along with that, there were thoughts on Nanase yet again. He was wondering how much thought the Kohai had given to Ikke. To be exact, how far ahead of the situation she thought. There was no other choice. If Kiyotaka wanted to find out Nanase's true identity, a true motive, he would have to carry on working with her. For the time being, as much as he could at least. It was before 9 in the morning. As soon as the group reached I8, Sudo's group took off towards the task in I9, whereas Kiyotaka and Nanase headed for J9. And for their next designated area, they would have to travel to J5. The two began to move again without a word, and take the path towards the beach. Around 20 minutes later, they had arrived in the northeast corner of I8, and continued towards H7 followed by J6. Kiyotaka then saw adults setting something up. He pulled out his tablet and saw a task. Beach Flag Showdown, he said out loud. It was an 8-boy and 8-girl event. For now, the two decided to ignore the task and prioritize reaching the designated area. Soon after they reached it, and he had gotten an arrival bonus for being first. While heading back to the Beach Flag task, a sudden group had appeared. It was a long line of visitors. Kiyotaka questioned how all of these people showed up in such a short time. As they went to register, a third-year student who seemed to be having fun with his friends changed his demeanor as soon as he saw Kiyotaka. It was Vice President Kiriyama. He then rushed over to the person in charge and started talking to them. Kiyotaka was curious about this and went to sign up for the event, but sadly was turned down as Kiriyama took the last spot. Nanase also stated she would sit this one out, as she didn't want to keep him waiting, but Kiyotaka insisted it was okay. After all, Nanase could end up taking points from the other grades. Kiyotaka decided to sit in a tent nearby to get out direct sunlight. He began to watch the event and noticed a strange line of participants. All the males were third-year students, along with the girls excluding Nanase. Kiyotaka could watch Kiriyama's match for now. He would win the first match. He also felt that everyone he was playing with had a strong desire to win, probably because he was watching. Well no, that wasn't the case, as even Kiriyama wasn't wary of Kiyotaka. So what was the reason for how these 30s were playing? It was stated that something even beyond what Kiyotaka was expecting could be going on here. The girls then finished changing, and were free to wait until the male match is finished. Kiyotaka had approached Nanase and wanted to ask her a question. She replied, looking up with a puzzled expression, asking what it was. Kiyotaka stated that the swimsuit Nanase picked out was a cute one, and if there was any reason for her picking that one. For her there was no reason. I guess you could see these type of ones when watching TV, seeing people play beach flags. So for Nanase it would probably feel weird to wear a normal school swimsuit. The boys tournament then ended with Kiriyama taking the win. The girls would be up next. Nanase would be going up against Tomioka, who had an OAA physical rating of C+, whereas Nanase had a higher one of B+. From the moment the match began, Nanase instantly took off from the starting position. The match was over before it even began. Tomioka stared up at the sky dumbfounded, and damn, like bruh, I would be too. Can you imagine something that fast happening in front of you? Not to mention a first year, my ego would be smashed. The 6 others watching would have known she was a formidable opponent. Even though Nanase was a cut above the rest in terms of reflexes and speed, she couldn't get careless. She won a second match by a landslide, and again, on the route of taking points for herself. She sure is formidable, voiced Vice President Kiriyama whilst he watched Nanase. Nanase then faced her final opponent, who had won her first 2 matches with ease, and also had the same OAA ranking of B+. This match would be even between competitors. Or you would think, but as soon as the match started, Nanase was way faster, taking the first step and launched herself towards the flag along the beach. Having across taking the flag, her opponent would see the difference between them, and asked for a handshake paying respect to her. After the match, Kiyotaka gave his compliments to Nanase, in which she thanked them. Her shoulders were moving up and down as she tried to catch her breath, but still, Kiyotaka felt she didn't go all out, and realized she may have had some energy to spare. But also had another thought, thinking that OAA ranking for the first years was based on junior high, but it's already summer, meaning that Nanase's rating did not change at all, staying at a B+. It would be capable of her to get an A- or even better yet, an A ranking. But for some reason, she doesn't. Nanase then felt she was a little unsettled. This was due to the fact of Kiyotaka standing so close staring at her. She averted her eyes, whilst also looking somewhat uncomfortable. Fat boy Kiyotaka slipping over analyzing, but at the same time, like, how can you blame the boy? During this task, you could see Nanase demonstrated amazing physical feats, and Kiyotaka at least appeared to have some energy left. The question really was, why does the girl Nanase Tsubasa have a rating of B+? Is she holding back, or is this just a coincidence? Only time can tell. Kiriyama then had his first words of Kiyotaka since he arrived, saying not to do anything unnecessary as he gazed towards the ocean behind Kiyotaka. You see several shadows behind playing. He then understood. It was Nagamo playing around in the water. He had then noticed he was looking at them, and he waved to Kiyotaka almost like he was calling him over. With that, Kiriyama left. Kiyotaka stated to Nanase he was going to talk to his senpai, and she could take her time changing. After all, he couldn't ignore Nagamo, so he decided to talk to him. Nagamo noticed Kiyotaka couldn't sign up for the task, from what he saw at least. This was the same in Kiyotaka's eyes, as he asked him the same thing. Judging the question was smug smile. Nagamo asked Kiyotaka if he wanted to join him and his friends for a swim. It wasn't just him but Asahina along with several other third years who had rented swimsuits along with a ball to play with. You can make the analysis they were comfy point-wise. Nagamo stated the Royal Challenge would start tomorrow, as this is when the top and bottom 10 would be announced, and added that it would be impossible for the lower grades to enter the winner's podium. Kiyotaka is no exception to this. Kiyotaka added that he is working alone, and he would most likely find his name around the bottom. Nagamo stated Kiyotaka should find a group, and teased him, adding that Manabu would be disappointed if he got kicked out of school. Nagamo was then called over by a senpai named Masuwaka. Noticing this, Asahina waited until Nagamo was a bit away and approached Kiyotaka. She heard Kiyotaka was going solo, and said it would be bad if he caught Nagamo's eye, and urged him to get more people in his group, was cut off by Kiyotaka saying he had to get going. Asahina was about to whisper something in Kiyotaka's ear, but Nagamo had returned. She stopped before getting any words out. She wished Kiyotaka good luck, and even though Asahina wasn't able to finish her words, Kiyotaka seemed to understand that Nagamo Miyabi had a strategy. To be exact, would be ones only he could pull off, making battles ahead in this exam even more treacherous. As of right now, the boy Kiyotaka Ayanokoji was someone on the outside, completely harmless if you will. He had no chance of taking any of the top spots. Nanase and Kiyotaka's third area of the day was H5. They seemed to aim getting there in an hour. Kiyotaka wondered if they should rush ahead getting the early bird bonus or take it slow, focus on getting a single point of arrival. They seemed to both have little or no water left. Kiyotaka had 5 liters at the start of the exam. It would seem that most students would probably run out of water today or tomorrow. You could say the days of struggling would begin here. Kiyotaka could have done a lot of things by himself, but he was with Nanase, and due to this it would be difficult to pull some things off. Sure, she would probably listen and try to keep the pace with him, but if she was to do this she would overexert herself. And she would probably be eliminated, and it would be all Kiyotaka's fault. Nanase then asked a random question, that being why he was on his own during the exam. Kiyotaka decided to give the answer that he doesn't have many friends, and couldn't find anyone to group up with. But Nanase wasn't buying this. She said he could have at least found someone to team with. He would ask if she was really bothered by this, and she was, because there were many risks and no offers or benefits. She then strode forward so she was able to keep up the pace with him, gave him a look like she was trying to grasp his true intentions. Instead of that, during the fight with Hosen, his movements were far normal than a high school student's. Kiyotaka fired back, stating she isn't the normal high school student herself either. Nanase seemed to get flustered by this. Having a forced smile, she scratched her cheek and agreed with him. In this very moment, Kiyotaka could ask a bunch of questions if he wanted to. All of this would depend if Nanase would tell him or not. They began to talk a little more. Nanase would ask if Kiyotaka had always been like this. A gloomy, pessimistic character to be exact. Kiyotaka replied saying people with this personality start to stay away, but Nanase didn't think so. She thought it was possible for him to become a bright, cheerful person. Just how a cheerful person could turn into a gloomy, pessimistic person one day. The main question what was being asked here was, to what extent could a person's core character really change? Kiyotaka then asked her if she's changed since junior high. He felt asking her this wasn't too inappropriate or unreasonable during the topic. Nanase then stopped and thought about this question for a moment. She wasn't sure, she stated, but maybe a little. In what way? Questioned Kiyotaka. Just like stated before, a person's core character could change, in Nanase's case at least, going from the light to the dark. She talks less with others, and even hangs out less with friends compared to junior high. One couldn't help if she was making up this story, or in fact, telling the truth. She carried on. Nanase felt something happened back then, something that changed her. Her voice began to trail off. Kiyotaka wondered if something had happened, decided it was best not to ask. He felt her true intention was to get him to pry further into it. He decided to change the topic and ask how her group was doing. Nanase stated she didn't know if it was each girl host and pulling in more points, but they both seemed to be doing better than her. They would both continue to do their best. Setting a goal in mind, they would continue making a forward path ahead. Around 1:55 in the afternoon, the two would reach their goal of H5. Even just earning 1 point would put Kiyotaka in the right direction. Having spare time, they would complete a task. Nanase was sitting down rehydrating. Kiyotaka mentioned she should take it easy and rest, but she seemed uneasy and worried about she would be left. Kiyotaka then reassured her again. If he was unhappy with her presence, then he would be direct. If she kept pushing herself, it would only make things worse in the future. Sure, she was frustrated, but not even Nanase could deny this fact. You could also say there was no benefit to this, at least in Kiyotaka's favor at least. With Nanase out of the picture for a short while, he would be able to move at his own will, even stating he may be able to make 2 or 3 task location. What really begs the question, how much was this man slowing himself down when with Nanase? This is like in a game where you have to follow one of the NPCs. It was bad for the boy, but hey, now he can move at his own will. He decided to do the history task. First place rewarded would only receive 5 points, but it included provisions. He was in luck and registered. By the time he had finished, Kiyotaka noted Hashimoto class 2A. He also noticed Kiyotaka, but instead called out to the adult in charge and dripped with sweat asking if he could register. They would be in the final group. It would just be Hashimoto and Kamado entering this task. Hashimoto spoke to Kiyotaka after a while, saying he has guts to go in solo, adding there's no way a guy who doesn't think he's going to win would go in solo in the first place. With the task beginning soon, they ended their conversation there. Kiyotaka ran through all 20 questions. He stated in the White Room history wasn't a priority, but nevertheless he remembers a fair bit of the subject. With the test being multiple choice, he was able to answer all the questions correctly without difficulty, and took the first 100 points, followed by a group of 30ers in second place, and third belonged to Hashimoto's group of 70. After the group once again, Hashimoto and Kiyotaka spoke again. Kiyotaka was heading towards the chemistry task, but for Hashimoto it was different. Instead of going for a task where they would lose instantly against Kiyotaka, they opted for another one. While after Kiyotaka had signed up for the next task, and got first place again, there was only one designated area left for the day, and he had gotten 48 points so far. Now reunited with Nanase all recovered, they decided to get moving into the final area of the day. Nanase had asked Kiyotaka how he planned to get more water. It seemed that even after winning both tasks, there was no water given. There was a task over at H3 where gave a 2-liter bottle of water. Nanase stated that getting water from the task would be limited. Kiyotaka broke down the total task and mentioned the number seems to be increasing each day. But even still, some would only give rewards for first place. Nanase wondered what he was thinking, as it looked like he had something on his mind. That being an emergency, Kiyotaka would go back to the start for water. If he was to do this, it would take hours. And if it was night, it would take even longer. Even still, this was the strategy Kiyotaka was going with. Nanase argued this and questioned if this dangerous move was the only strategy he had in mind. They discussed the water situation more, and Kiyotaka decided they would get sea or river water and sterilize it by boiling it. Hearing that, Nanase was relieved and caught a sight of a flowing river. She added that they strayed from their path and they need to go further east. Going towards I4, their current position was putting them at H4. Kiyotaka mentioned that he wasn't planning to get the early bird bonus this time, so it's fine. Nanase blinked, questioning this. While in the center of H, they stumbled across Sakagami-sensei, who was setting up a task. A few minutes later, they were able to register to the task. By being here early, Kiyotaka won himself a 2-liter bottle of water, and Nanase a 1.5 bottle of water. That was the task. Just by being here first, you got a bottle of water. Luck, if you really want to put it that way. With that all said and done, they shared some words and strategies and decided to rush towards I4. But that luck wouldn't last much longer, as the two wouldn't be able to get the early bird bonus at I4. And to top it off, they weren't blessed with any additional tasks afterwards either. Soon after, they met with a loud voice belonging to Ike, who was holding branches in his arms, and he asked if the two were camping in this area tonight. Both him and Nanase tried to engage in conversation, although it was hard because the two were across the river from each other. Nanase and Kiyotaka went up the river. Not before long, they reached the south side of H4. And just like that, they were able to meet up with Ike, but not only that, Suda and Hondo too. Suda asked Kiyotaka what his last designated area was of the day. I4. Without being able to finish his sentence, Kiyotaka started answering Suda's very question. What a true coincidence. Not only were they in the same area now, but it happened to be in the same area in the morning. In the end, they decided to make camp just like they did the previous day. Since they all had some free time, they decided to go do their own things. Kiyotaka for one told Nanase he wanted to take a walk alone. It wasn't like there was any meaning to this, but if he needed a reason, he would probably say he was looking for other students. There was still the fact that he hadn't come into contact with a single student at the same table as him other than Nanase. Around 30 minutes later, Kiyotaka returned to the others as Ike was getting the campfire going. Nanase then came back and greeted Kiyotaka. She said she was taking a while and decided to look for him, all while gazing at the woods. Soon after, it was nearing time to eat. Ike had taken out a bucket and inside was several fish, all what Ike had caught. Damn, Ike, you did something useful. That's crazy, bruh. He was starting to prepare food in a little hurry. At a quick first glance, you would probably think that he was okay, but in truth, he was only pretending to be in good spirits. A little while after, another group was passing by. It was a group of 3 who happened to be drawn over by the smell of fish. Ah! A girl gasped as she made contact with Kiyotaka. It was Kei Karuizawa, or, well, Kiyotaka's girlfriend. This reaction was obvious. After all, in all 3 days, this was the first time they had bumped into each other. Kay made the suggestion that her group should camp here today, adding that Ike would give him some food too. No way, repeated Ike, saying there would be less if they had some. But Pseudo interjected, saying she may know something about Shinohara, and that pushed Ike a little. He allowed them to stay and even had some fish too. Even though Kay was half joking, it ended with both groups camping together. A little bit after, Kiyotaka told everyone he's taking another walk into the woods while Ike was grilling fish, and soon after, Kay followed. The two met by a large tree trunk and sat down with their backs against it, holding hands. They began to talk. Kay's group had managed to score a total of 37 points from 3 days. For now, her group would remain safe. She would ask how he was doing, but well, she already knew the answer. Kay let out a sigh, saying she wishes the exam was over. There was 11 days left. When you really think about it, the exam was still starting. Kiyotaka then asked her if anything had changed over the past few days. What he was referring to was, before the exam, he asked Kay to check something for him. He did this just in case the White Room student may have contacted her, but over the past 3 days there was nothing. One thing Kay did do was jot down notes into every student she came into contact with. On that list there was no first nor third years shown. One more other thing, Kay said to Kiyotaka, bringing her face closer, peering into his eyes. She heard Kiyotaka had been traveling with first year, and asking what was up with that. Word gets around here fast, I see, replied Kiyotaka. Damn, if you think he wasn't in shit last volume of Ichika, now he's with nanase? Damn, that boy is looking real sus. He couldn't blame her though. After all, it was him hanging out and going around with a member of the opposite sex the whole day. Kay couldn't help but be concerned. Are you worried? Asked Kiyotaka. In defense, Kay said it's not like she's worried or anything, and paused for a second, but continued. She was worried, and tried to put on a brave front at first, but couldn't carry on. Kiyotaka reassured he had no choice but to work with her, but had no ulterior motives. Kay believed him, but said when she heard he was with another girl, she just hated it. A complete natural occurrence. Kay. He only said her name. When she did, she turned to look at him with a dissatisfied pout. Within this moment, he took advantage and pressed his lips against her. It was only less than a second. The feeling of their lips touching was even more soft than Kiyotaka would imagine. Huh? Was all Kay could say. She was dazed and well couldn't comprehend the situation. Kiyotaka had some thoughts to himself. One being that he wanted to enjoy this moment for longer. But after all, they had their exam to finish. Kay continued to freak out. Kiyotaka said to have faith in him and wait. Hearing that, she nodded repeatedly. The worries of them suspecting something, they decided to head back, with the dumbfounded Kay going back first, of course. This was really funny and shows the assertive and I guess a romantic side of Kiyotaka too, if you want to call it that. I guess he wanted to calm Kay down and relieve her stress, but hey, let's be honest, it was probably a pretty simple way to do that. But it's Kiyotaka, that boy a playboy, even when he don't want to be. And with that sweet, soft kiss, we end chapter 5. On to the next. The next morning around 5 AM, the sun was starting to rise. You see, most would be asleep at this time, but Kiyotaka woke up due to this sound. This strange sound coming from his tent. It was faint. He wasn't sure if he was hearing things. When going to investigate, you could really hear a sound, but still quiet. This same sound must have woken Nanase as she was also investigating. Kiyotaka would ask if she heard something. She did, but it was faint, and described it as some kind of electronic beeping noise. It could have been with how far away it was. Maybe they think something else is making the sound. But this very thing could also be mistaken as something simple as ringing in the ears or somebody's alarm. Nanase brought the idea that it could have been an emergency alarm. To Kiyotaka, the noise sounded like the exact description Mashima had played during the info meeting. Some time would pass. 1 minute to be exact, and it still wasn't stopping. The emergency alert alarm was designed to be continuous, whereas other warnings were set to go off twice. School officials would arrive within 5 minutes of the alarm sounding. It was a good idea to wait in case of danger. Kiyotaka even brought up this idea, but Nanase wanted to go out and go help. In Kiyotaka's eyes, he felt they had no reason. Nanase wouldn't take this, and gave Kiyotaka a piercing gaze. She asked if they really needed a reason to go and help someone. She was angry, and fully prepared to go herself. Kiyotaka budged and decided if they're going to go do something, they would have to go wake Pseudo and the others too. She agreed. Some time passed and the groups found themselves in the woods as they moved towards the sound. The path wasn't as good as it was still dark, but with a shining light at their feet, they carefully tread forward. They also decided to take one tablet so they wouldn't get lost. Well, guess I'll take the lead. It was Ike. Kiyotaka would notice he didn't seem confident about it. But Nanase interjected, saying if he would refrain from this. Even Ike would ask why. Her reply being that she couldn't agree to someone technically unreliable take the lead. Ike tried to argue this, but was cut off once again by Nanase, who would ask Kiyotaka to take the lead without even listening to what Ike had to say. Damn, I feel bad for Ike low-key, like Nanase has no chill. Ike will say a little more, but just like that, Kiyotaka was in the lead. Little by little, over time, they got closer and closer to the sounds in the woods. Even now, you could hear it echo loudly throughout the woods. Bit by bit, closer and closer, the sound got louder. Pseudo would ask if there was anyone out there, and if someone was, could they call out? There was no response. The question was then thrown around if they were in a situation they could call for help. The only way to find out was to keep moving closer and closer into the source of the sound. The sound was a little peculiar, stated nanase. She was referring to the frequency of the sound. To be exact, there wasn't just one sound, there was two. In the woods, surrounded by darkness, these two sounds echoed throughout the area. Something that can only be described as creepy. Hell, I'd run the out of there too. Fuck Scooby-Doo shit, I am gone. Not before long, they saw this illuminated figure what was on the ground. Suda was the first to realize who this was. It was Komiya from Class 2B. His face, blue. As for his pulse, no beat. I'm joking, he's alive, don't hate me. The other sound was coming from Kinoshita Minori, also from Class 2B. But there was another member of the group who couldn't be seen. Sinahara of Class 2D. Ike would shout at the unconscious Komiya asking what happened to her. After checking over two, nanase seemed to come to the conclusion that one had fallen down a slope and the other must have been trying to help but also fell. Kiyotaka would also see the slope and noticed it showed some signs of someone obviously falling down. Vision was poor, but someone could have easily slipped and fallen. Pointing his flashlight down, Kiyotaka noticed it was muddy and depending on where you would step, you could see footprints. Of course, you could see footprints belonging to them, but it was another set. These footprints probably came close to their bodies and then quickly turned back. It was unlikely to be Sinahara, she wouldn't just turn away, but the odds of these footprints belonging to a girl were high. When looking at Kinoshita's face and clothes, you could see that they were scratched up and dirty just like Komiya, but there were no signs of major external damage. You couldn't really tell the full extent of their injuries. There's no way you can avoid a medical team checking on them too. If they were really to fall off a slope, this would be needed, and likely they would be eliminated from the special exam. Ike would shout for Sinahara's name in the dimly lit woods. Kiyotaka would warn him, if he goes into the woods without a tablet he would just get lost. She wasn't anywhere nearby, so it was likely she wasn't injured. Soon a groan came from Komiya. He seemed to respond to the calls through his names and grabs it onto Sudo's jacket, and called out in pain. He wasn't able to move this left leg at all. There was a look of agony on his face. Even Sudo was shaken by this. And Kinoshita's left leg appeared to be in bad shape. At worst case, broken. Not only had both fallen down a slope, but both seemed to suffer an accident and injury towards their legs. Nanase whispered into Kiyotaka's ear, asking if he thought there was something off about the situation. He did, and felt the two may have found themselves into some kind of situation. They were trying to ask Komiya what happened. He said he didn't know, but he felt something hit him in the calf really hard. He was sent rolling down a slope. Something hit you? Asked Kiyotaka. Komiya questioned this himself, said he didn't remember. His memory was fuzzy, and of course you couldn't blame him. He would yell frantically, asking where Sinahara was. It would look like he was in so much pain the more he talked. Kiyotaka added he didn't have to push himself. He didn't know where she was and tried to push himself up. Komiya was struggling but shook his head, tried to get some composure, and decided to take it from the beginning. He mentioned they were in a hurry, and they missed their designated area twice in a row, so they planned to close the distance early in the morning. Sinahara said she had to use the bathroom so that both of them would wait for her while looking down a slope. He was thinking it would be difficult for them to go, and that's how the story ends. That being the moment something hitting his calf and him remembering it hurt a big amount. Something about this happening in Kinoshita doesn't add up too well. You can't just say they slipped and fell. Kiyotaka felt the unidentified footprints were concerning. All of a sudden there was a rustle, so they were about to think they could hear something moving at the top of the slope. Sinahara, shouted Ike. Hearing this random sound, he took off. Nanase it was dangerous for him to go alone, so Kiyotaka left his tablet and took off. He managed to overtake Ike to show him the lead, but Ike was shocked. Ike thought Kiyotaka came to try and stop him. This caused him to get impatient, and he nearly slipped. Kiyotaka caught his arm and told him to calm down and follow. Ike would shout Sinahara's name, hoping it would finally reach her. He would slam his fist into the ground. Ike was frustrated, but soon after, someone would call out to him. It was Sinahara who was crouched down in some bushes. When she realized it was them, she came rushing over and threw herself into Ike's chest, trembling with tears down her face. It seemed like she was there the whole time, but she seemed to be shaking. It was like she knew something. Ike would ask what happened to the two, referring to Komiya and Kinoshita. Sinahara was scared. She said she couldn't move and she saw something. Saw what? Ike questioned. Sinahara seemed to see someone push Komiya and Kinoshita. Ike would shout who, but Sinahara said she didn't know, or why someone would do that. He clenched his teeth and was frustrated he saw Sinahara collapse onto the ground and just sobbed deeply. The two assumed she was hiding in the bush after seeing what she saw. It was reasonable to see why she didn't rush over or respond to any calls. There wasn't any evidence to back the words what Sinahara was saying. But even still, she wasn't the type of student to lie or make a story up like that. And it was fair to say in this darkness anyone could sneak up without two noticing. Although this person would have to do this with low visibility. One thing Sinahara seemed to recall around 8:30 the previous night, there was a first year group camping close to them, pointing north to be exact. Although she did not remember it was 3 girls and 1 boy. For the time being they decided to meet up with others. They took a detour to avoid the risky route they took there. Now in the perspective of Nanase. Around 5 minutes after Kiyotaka went after Ike, Nanase would lay Kinoshita down gently and stood back up gazing into the woods behind her. Suda asked what's wrong, but Nanase did not have the time to answer his questions. Felt something was provoking them, and it was obvious they were being watched the entire time. Even though their presence was made known, they didn't make a move to show themselves. Now the question, how long did this person make their presence known? The answer to this was around when Kiyotaka took off. Nanase would state you could feel this person's very presence in the air. She did not know the reasons nor what was going on. She steadied her breathing and felt this person knew they were aware of their presence, but even still did not move. You may have felt confident in their abilities, but for Nanase that was the same case. She told Tsudo to watch for two, and kicked off the ground, sprinting in that direction of the presence she felt. Even if they tried to run, Nanase would catch up and force them to talk. The distance between the two was around 10 to 20 meters at most. Not only that, but the morning sun began to rise, Nanase's vision was slowly but surely clearing up. Not before long she would catch up. So far, she said out loud as she grabbed the mystery person's jersey cuff, but sadly they were just too quick. The mystery person made good use of their surroundings, managed to evade Nanase without giving away a single bit of their identity. Even so, Nanase would chase, but to her luck, she couldn't close the distance. The figure would just get further and further from Nanase. It wasn't just the speed of this individual, it was almost like they knew the terrain completely, and was picking the best possible paths as they were on their escape. But that wouldn't stop Nanase. She would continue this chase, and shouted she just wanted to talk, but even still they would keep running. She decided to change her strategy, decided to agitate the person. Say because of their actions, two people are greatly injured. But that did the opposite. Instead, the mystery person got even faster. She continued to chase them, and at some points it looked like she would catch up, but that was only for a little while. It was almost like their actions were speaking to Nanase. Come on, try and catch me if you can. Nanase would try her best to do so, and wouldn't give up to the very end. Suddenly Nanase was able to catch sight of the opponent's hair swaying as they ran in front of him. It was only for an instant, but this person's hair color and even hairstyle was burned into her very eyes. She continued, but not before long, Nanase's foot got caught in a tree, bringing her chase to an end. The reason for her tripping wasn't because she got distracted, it was because she realized the sudden truth. Not before long, the fatigue was building up in the young girl and engulfed her body. She was completely out of breath. Huffing and puffing over and over, she closed her eyes trying to slow down her heart, which was now racing. Although the look she got wasn't the best, Nanase had no doubts about this person's identity. Don't tell me you pushed Komiya and Kinoshita-senpai? But why? Those questions Nanase asked out loud as she stared off into the woods a little longer. It was like she was still searching for any kind of the person who had now vanished into the trees. Now back to Kiyotaka. Him and the duo of Shinohara and Ike managed to find a path back down, and when doing so, they found Nanase was walking alone. Kiyotaka questioned Nanase on what she was doing here, even thinking that Tsudo and the others were a fair bit away from the location where she is at now. Nanase, out of breath and sweat trickling down her forehead, said she went to go look for them, but Kiyotaka noticed something else. It was her eyes. It was almost like they were looking somewhere else. He followed up asking if she was searching for something. Nanase asked him not to worry about it, but had the same stiff expression on her face. Soon after, she looked at Shinohara, and she was glad that Ike found her safely, letting out a genuine sigh of relief. Since Nanase knew the direction back, she took the lead. In the meantime, Kiyotaka told her what Shinohara told him just before. Specifically, she told Nanase that someone pushed those two off the edge, but added they still didn't know if this person was a boy or the girl who had done the deed. Not before ending the sentence, Kiyotaka offered one more piece of information. That being Shinohara passed by a group of first-year students the night prior. First-year students? Nanase questioned, and added they might be able to investigate some further clues. Kiyotaka even felt this would be difficult, as students would always be on the move from time to time during this island exam. But the fact that those first-year students nagged at the boy, thinking it could be the White Room student. After all, they would do something daring as pushing someone off a cliff. After a while, Nanase spoke again, asking if it was strange that Komiya didn't notice anyone. Kiyotaka agreed, saying if someone would have shown up, he would have thought there would have been some back and forth, and Komiya should have remembered something. Had it really been an accident? Or someone greatly able to injure the two without being noticed? Nanase then asked Kiyotaka would he be able to injure the two without being noticed? Me? He questioned, following up, asking her not to talk nonsense. Are you sure about it, Kiyotaka? My boy be capping hard. But of course, it was to dodge the question. In the case of him wanting to do it, it was entirely possible. Komiya stated he was striking the calf with a great force. So if you approached him with a dart at full force and kicked him in the calf, he probably would have went rolling down the slope. Nanase then took the very question onto herself, saying it wouldn't be impossible for her depending on the timing, but it would be a very hard task. Kiyotaka wondered what the reason for attacking the two was. Was it to send a message to him, he thought? But ruled out the idea as he thought the risks were too great if that was the case. Or maybe they were demonstrating that they weren't afraid to take such risks. Many possibilities in this situation, even one being that this wasn't the White Room student at all. Nothing had changed since they left. The question was, when would the teachers arrive, questioned Kiyotaka. A little while after, a group of first-year students arrived and asked if something happened. I had a total of 3 girls and 1 boy, matching up perfectly with the statement Shinohara gave. Kiyotaka mentioned the 2 students fell down a slope and got hurt badly. Hearing that response, the first-year students exchanged looks with Kiyotaka. They then asked if the injured students were okay. A lone girl by the name of Yagami took the lead. speaking up for her group. She looked flustered with another member of the group, although Tsubaki, who was also in the group, looked calm despite the other two being seriously injured. Around 30 minutes later, a full hour after the first emergency alert went off, reps from the school finally arrived. Bro, a whole hour? Worst case, one of them could have like hit their head and like bled out. Like, bro, an hour? First two to appear were Sakagami sensei from class 2B and Chabashira sensei, along with 3 other adults, who Kiyotaka presumed were medical personnel. Sakagami sensei then asked what happened as he approached Komiyo sitting up and Kinosho, who was still unconscious. Students began to gather around the area. Seeing this, Kiyotaka approached Chabashira, who had been looking in his direction, and mentioned it would be a great difficulty for Komiyo to continue the exam. Chabashira agreed, but had a dispirited look on her face, probably because one of Komiyo members were from her class. Was it a simple accident, he asked? I think we'll be finding out soon enough, replied Chabashira. Sakagami sensei then approached Shinohara to ask for her explanation, but she began to break into tears again. Crying isn't going to help us understand the situation, said Sakagami. Ike went to explain, and first mentioned the two were pushed. Sakagami looked up at the slope they had fallen from. Pushed, he repeated. It was troubling. He couldn't really believe it. He then asked if they had any evidence. Both Ike and Shinohara were at a loss of words hearing this. Sakagami then carried on saying if they were pushed, they would have seen some type of perpetrator's face at least. Then turned to Shinohara asking if she had anything to say instead of just crying. Bro, this man a whole savage, like god damn. Shinohara got some words out saying it was the dark. Sakagami couldn't seem to believe how Shinohara could see the two getting pushed but not the perpetrator's face. He got closer asking her to speak the truth, but Shinohara was crying so hard she couldn't even manage to speak. The only thing she could do was nod her head and try her best to convince him it was true. Ike then shouted saying Shinohara would never lie. But even still, Sakagami wouldn't budge, adding that Ike is her classmate and of course he would say that. Ike continued to shout, asking if Sakagami didn't believe Shinohara. It wasn't like Sakagami was trying to be unkind, simply because the two injuries weren't so slight. It was something more serious. He had no choice but to leave the Shinoharas lying to them to fool them into thinking they couldn't get hurt due to an accident. Ike Snap replied that anyone could believe that crap. Sakagami with a cold reply saying he'll forget the outburst he just heard, but just this once, and asked if Ike understood. Watching this, Kiyotaka turned to Chabashira, saying it would seem she figured out some things already. She went to give out the exact GPS signals of Komiya and Kenosha, giving out the exact times and showing the only other GPS signal at the time of the emergency alert was Shinohara's. Teachers had almost no choice but to assume Shinohara made up a story. After all, that's what the evidence shows. Kiyotaka wondered if the culprit maybe wasn't a student, but maybe a teacher, as they didn't wear watches. But he ruled that off for not sounding right. With Chabashira leaving soon, Kiyotaka asked her to investigate something, leaning in, whispering something in her ear. She seemed almost surprised by the request, but nodded and agreed to do what he asked. With all that, it would seem that Shinohara would be all alone. She continued to cry. She couldn't do this alone. Even Ike couldn't say anything as he watched her break down. Many people noticed Ike was doing this, including Komiya, called Ike over. What? Asked Ike. Show her you're a man, he said. After those very words, Komiya would practically collapse onto his stretcher. It was like Komiya entrusted Shinohara to his romantic rival. This is crazy, said Tsuno. Watching, he probably understood everything. Nanase would offer a suggestion, saying if she could take her supplies to the starting point and wait there, she can avoid not getting eliminated. This would probably be the best strategy with Shinohara working alone, but she would have to hope other groups start getting eliminated soon. Chabashira would even ask what she was going to do, adding it would be hard for her to continue alone. Shinohara fully understands this. For now, all they could do was hope. As she was about to leave, Ike rushed over and grabbed her by the arm. He asked if she was really okay with doing this on her own, and heading back to the start. What choice do I have, she replied. The two argued back and forth, and it was like Komiya's unseen hand was pushing Ike's back forward. I'll do something about it, he shouted as Shinohara continued to walk away without listening. Ike added on saying he wouldn't let her get expelled because of this. Shinohara would continue to argue, saying if she gets expelled, the chances of him getting expelled would just go down. Then asked him a question. Would that make him happy? Happy, Ike questioned, adding on there was no way he'd be happy about that. The lovebirds continued to argue for longer, but Ike couldn't get her to budge as she got further and further away. Kanji, Pseudo called out. He had a bold grin on his face, almost telling Ike not to worry too much. After this, Ike tried to get some more words out, but couldn't seem to find the right ones. It was like these very words were on the tip of the boy's tongue, but they couldn't seem to leave. He needed one final push, but nor Pseudo, or Nanase, or even Kiyotaka could make Ike say those words. The only one who could was him. Ike himself controlled his fate in this situation. He still feared the near future and consequences of what would come, but he had no choice. He had to suppress these feelings of fear and take that step forward and just go. Wait, I said, shouted Ike. Geez, you scared me, replied Shinohara, asking if there was something else he wanted to say. Yes, there is. I have something big to say, adding on that he doesn't want her to get expelled, and he would save her. Pseudo shouted yeah, and if that's what Ike decided, then they have to get down to strategizing. Even Hondo agreed, both behind Ike supporting whatever choice he chooses to make. Shinohara asked if they were stupid, and still wouldn't walk back over to him. Seeing that, Ike ran up and grabbed her arm once more. He wouldn't let her go. Seeing this, Chubashira let out a little smile. She probably had decided everything would be fine for now, and left soon after. Shinohara will have to join up with a group of at least 3 open spaces. Again, it wouldn't be easy, but they were determined to help Shinohara find a group. They began to discuss a little, and Kiyotaka mentioned he had a plan. All he replied was that Ike should take the lead in protecting Shinohara, and they should earn as much points as possible. Kiyotaka would then start putting together a contingency plan in case of an emergency. But Kiyotaka had to tell them there was a possibility they may have to abandon Shinohara, as if another classmate was to fall into the bottom 5, they'll have to decide who to save. Don't forget that, Ike, said Kiyotaka. I got it, he replied. A little later, they arrived back at the campsite. It would seem Kei, who was camping nearby, had already left. Kiyotaka instructed Suda to take care of Ike and the others, and added that out of everyone there, he was the most capable of making level-headed decisions. Since the designated areas were already announced, Kiyotaka and Nanase went to go head out. It was the 4th day of the exam, and this was the day the top and bottom 10 groups would be announced. Not only that, but this was also the day they would let large groups form by taking part in tasks. The 2's designated area was G3, meaning they had to travel north from the location on the island. It would take them an hour to make it, and already 30 minutes behind, they could kiss goodbye to the early bird bonus. Kiyotaka was feeling curious, checked the rankings, mainly the bottom 5. Without a word, Nanase looked over and peeked his tablet. The bottom 10 was neatly arranged in a list. Not only that, it showed members of each group and their scores. Out of all the groups in the bottom 10, 7 of them were solely from Class 3B and 3D. The group in last place was a 3-person team in Class 3D with a total score of 21 points. The remaining in the bottom 10 was a group of second year students and 2 first years. The set of the second year students was none other than Kiyotaka's classmates, Haruka, Akito, and Airi. Nanase even stated these are people in Kiyotaka's class. This is a dangerous situation. They were 9th from the bottom with 28 points. Worse than Kiyotaka thought. Kiyotaka thought he would have to shoot for the arrival bonus at G3 for now and skip the designated areas after. There was somewhere he wanted to go. Nanase knew this and said she would accompany him, as if her teammates got to those points it would be fine. The reason for Kiyotaka wanted to skip was due to him figuring out how to save Shinohara. He then walked onwards as they reached G3. They would make their way back to the starting area. He had no choice. He wanted to make it back there by tomorrow. It was around 7 o'clock on the 5th day of the exam. Kiyotaka and Nanase were walking from area D4 to area D5. After they reached their point at G3 yesterday, they ignored the following 3 areas. For today, the first designated area was I-8, but since it was so far away, it made them accept it without feeling too bitter. Maybe it was because of the gentle murmuring of the river. Who knows? Anyways, their goal for now was helping Shinohara. Thankfully, the group did not appear in the bottom 10, but she wasn't out of the water yet, as groups in the bottom 10 must probably start picking up points soon. Shinohara may have a day or maybe 2 before she joins them. We then spotted someone fishing. It was a lone student in the distance by a rocky shore, passing the time by fishing. Kiyotaka knew who it was instantly due to the physical appearance. It was a person he was wanting to meet up with more than anyone else. Kiyotaka asked Nanase if they could stop here, and of course she agreed. He gotten close to them and noticed his presence. Not before long, Katsuragi of Class 2B spoke, saying he heard Kiyotaka took the exam on his own, and he's surprised he hasn't fallen into the bottom 10. Somehow, more or less, he replied, and added if he took it easy for more than a day, he would fall fast. To someone who overheard this from the tent, that man being Ryuuen Kakaru, instantly calling out Kiyotaka, asking if he got tired of Kei, and if that's why he's walking around with another chick so casually. Karuizawa? Katsuragi questioned, and then asked Ryuuen why he mentioned her. Kuku, ain't nothing, don't worry about it, replied Ryuuen. Kiyotaka mentioned if the two were doing well. As stated before, you could also see the top and bottom rankings, and at the top he saw Katsuragi and Ryuuen at 10th place with 92 points, compared to Kiyotaka with 52 points. Shut the hell up, replied Ryuuen, then asking if that freak show with a bunch of screws loose is one of his guys. Yep, that's right, replied Kiyotaka, referring to the man with 126 points, the Giga Chad Konji in 4th place. But there was still 10 days left till the exam was over. If he was to have some kind of accident or get sick, who knows what could happen. He really couldn't afford to take it easy during this exam. Kiyotaka then asked Ryuuen what his next designated area was, adding they seemed to be pretty laid back even though it's past 7. Katsuragi jumped in saying he wanted to stop, saying the past 4 days they've been moving at a faster pace and challenged themselves a little more. Ryuuen of course wore a thin and smug smile as always. It was him who would push everything to the limit, whenever and wherever. But of all people, Katsuragi had got him to stop. This really shows Katsuragi had become an important part of Class 2B. The four began to talk a little more, and the topic of Komi and Kinoshita came up, which Kiyotaka mentioned they got eliminated. Ryuen's smile faded. He mentioned that he got seriously injured. Katsuragi would then ask if it was an accident. Well, that's... Ryuen would assume that certain someone got eliminated too then. but they explained due to lack of evidence the school couldn't believe Shinohara. Katsagi knew even if they made it to the top 3 it wouldn't matter if those 2 got expelled. Ryuuen then asked if that's why Kiyotaka was looking for him, and he's already got a plan to stop them from getting expelled. Kiyotaka then turned to Nanase apologizing, saying she couldn't hear the rest of the conversation, as the survival of the second years is at stake. I understand, she replied. Kiyotaka then explained the plan to Ryuuen. Ryuuen asked if it would go all smoothly. Our chance will be better if you work together with us, replied Kiyotaka. You got some balls, man, changing this up, Ryuuen said, adding if the others realize they're going to make a move. Kiyotaka nodded, saying this was the reason he didn't want Nanase to overhear, as if the first years found out, they'll most likely turn into a battle between the second and the other year groups. All along he wanted Ryuuen to work with him. Our interests align on this one, so ain't no way I'm not going to make use of this plan, he replied. With that, the conversation ended, and Kiyotaka asked if he can tell Ichinose if he's to run into her. Ryuuen replied, calling Ichinose goody two-shoes, and brought up Saki and Nagi, saying he can't imagine she would lend a hand so easily. But Kiyotaka differed, saying she isn't the type who'll let herself get outdone by a couple of first years. Kuku, guess you're right. With the unexpected meeting ended, Kiyotaka made his way back out. A little while after, Nanase and Kiyotaka had planned going towards the starting point, but unexpectedly tossed a pin at a mountain area C5. This one was a tug of war, but the conditions were different for the others. It was quite strict, it was limited to 2 women and 2 men, but you can earn 5 points for just participating. And if you happen to win, you can earn an extra 10 points, meaning a whole 15 points. This was definitely worth it. They decided to head there, and it was a good chance nobody would show up, meaning it would be a free 15 points. We moved at a quick pace, and not before long, with 5 minutes to spare, someone had gotten there before them. He got here rather quick, didn't he? Said Nanase. He must have been close. I have to wonder about that, replied Kiyotaka. Even if this man was on the south side of C5, it should have taken him a little bit of time. Who, you may ask? Why, of course, it was the man Konji. Getting here faster than them was one thing, but he didn't even seem to have a bag, nor so any supplies on him. Just a single bottle of water. This may explain how he's able to climb so quick. After a single sip of his water, the man proceeded to dump the rest over his head like he was bathing in it. Truly majestic, y'all. The Giga God, if you will. Ah, I'm simply dripping with radiance. What a marvelous, splendid, handsome young man I am. It would seem I have powered up even more since a year ago, the man Konji declared out loud. Not even Nanase knew who he was talking to. Probably himself, Kiyotaka replied, adding that he's intoxicated with his own self. I see, replied Nanase, probably shocked about the sight of the god she is witnessing before her, but also puzzled, as just like the rest of us, she is unable to understand the behavior of Koji. Really couldn't blame her. The 2 went to go sign up. As for Nanase, she had no opponent, so she automatically won. As for Kiyotaka, would face off against Konji. This was the first one-on-one confrontation Kiyotaka would have during this exam so far, and oh boy, it wasn't an easy one. Even Kiyotaka prayed this wasn't the start of some strange destiny between him and the man Konji. If Kiyotaka was to hand the win to Konji, it would probably be best to lose instantly, so he wouldn't waste energy and would collect 5 points off the rip. But Konji was able to see through Kiyotaka. See through his plan. It would be better for Class 2D if he was able to just hand over the points to Konji. It was like he read Kiyotaka's face completely. He spoke some words to Kiyotaka saying it's not every day he would get to fight against him when he's motivated. The staff member in charge then began to count from 10. When it hit 0, they were both set to start pulling the rope. Kiyotaka wanted to make it look like he was putting in some effort, but Konji sensed he had little motivation and called him out on it. Kiyotaka is almost transparent to his classmate here. Not only that, but Konji carried on talking and said Kiyotaka could give it a shot. But no matter how hard he struggled, victory would not smile upon him. 3, 2, 1, 0. They set off, and at the exact moment the staff member shouted 0, Kiyotaka started tugging on the rope gently. Konji was serious, he would pull him over the line within a second. But the rope didn't budge. Not even a single millimeter. Instead, the man across from Kiyotaka, Konji, stared and wore a bold grin, waiting for Kiyotaka to make a move. So Kiyotaka decided to resist a little, to make him feel threatened, causing him to panic so he would do something about it. He tilted his body backwards without bending the waist, then bent his knee and pulled the rope close to his waist, and he felt a sudden vicious lash of force pulling back the rope. What is needed in order to win at tug of war isn't technique, but pure power, uttered Konji. It wasn't like Kiyotaka was going easy on him, but Konji wasn't pulling enough to return the middle part back to his original position. The two were about even in arm strength. Not only that, Konji even weighed more than Kiyotaka. You could say in tug of war, Kiyotaka was outclassed in the biggest aspect, that being weight. It would be hard to beat Konji. But Kiyotaka happened to use every ounce of strength in his body, and just maybe he could turn this match into a fierce battle between the two, and make the classmate across from him make some kind of mistake. But of course that would waste both time and energy. The rope continued to dig into Kiyotaka's fingers painfully. Man Konji truly did possess a strength seemed to be unimaginable. He even states that the likes of Sudo and Albert were nowhere near the level of the man Konji. In fact, Kiyotaka would also say the title of Ultra High School student wouldn't even cover it. The match shortly came to an end with Kiyotaka letting go of his tight grip. Konji seemed to be frustrated with the result and didn't talk much after losing his interest, of course. The task would end with Class D getting a total of 25 points. Kiyotaka would ask nanase if she had energy to spare. She replied saying her legs are starting to get sore in some places and began to rub her thighs a little. Around 2 hours after they reached the exam starting point at the harbor D9, you can see nanase was struggling to keep up and even arrived a minute after Kiyotaka, completely out of breath. When at the harbor you see things like showers, free medical care, and even restrooms. There's no wonder why students would venture back here. She then asked Kiyotaka why he wanted to venture back to this point, but he cut her off saying before that they should check out the task at D9. The task was open swimming, will involve crossing the finish line by swimming 2 kilometers, giving 20 points for winning. Unfortunately, the task for boys was full up. By who, you may ask? It was Konji. He was here at this task right after they finished too. Nanase went to go take part, while Kiyotaka went to go make contact with a certain someone. Not before long he found them, sitting elegantly on a peach chair with a parasol popped up on a nice sandy beach. Hello there, Ayanokoji-kun. It seems like it's going to be another extremely hot day, doesn't it? Sakinagi said, calling out to him. He asked how she was doing, and she replied Ichinose and Shibata were giving their best efforts for her. Of course, if a student is eliminated from their group, they can't get the early bird bonus. But for theirs, it was different, due to Sakinagi's condition, of course. The group wasn't in the top 10, but it was safe to say they were doing well. He then asked what business he had doing here. Then mentioned saying Nanase has around 30 minutes left until she's done with the task. How she knew Nanase was because she receives reports on what's happening here on the island, she explained. This wouldn't be so strange, as many times Kiyotaka has crossed paths with people from Class 2A. He asked if it was okay to join her. After all, he is an enemy. Poof, of course it's alright, said Sakinagi. They then watched the task and found it overwhelmingly one-sided, since of course Konji was participating. Kiyotaka then had a favor to ask Sakinagi. They talked about the Kinoshita situation, and how Shinohara is alone. Somehow Sakinagi would figure out what Kiyotaka's request was, and asked if he spoke with Ryuuen, where Kiyotaka replied saying he has, and he thinks high of his plan. Is that so? Questioned Sakinagi, turning ahead to Kiyotaka, wearing a broad and delighted smile. But added for Ryuuen it was natural for him to join, but for her there was little benefit. However, she continued, Kiyotaka is willing to accept teaming under the same conditions, then it will be a different story. With that, the team was formed, with both Sakinagi and Ryuuen. He thought it wasn't a good idea to stay around too long, so he nodded his head and told her he would be in contact later. After that, Kiyotaka returned to the center of the harbor and caught eye of some students trying to purchase some supplies from Mashima-sensei. They spoke and it was good timing because Mashima wanted to see Kiyotaka. He asked Kiyotaka to make it look like he was buying supplies, and they spoke a little. Mashima added Tsukishiro hasn't made a move yet since the exam has started. That's fine, but Kiyotaka felt there was some things that were strange still. There was supposed to be 1 helicopter and 1 small boat, but for some reason there's 2 boats now. The reason for this was Tsukishiro had arranged for it just in case, meaning they could assume there's multiple rescue operations that may occur during this island exam. Tsukishiro tends to spend his time in a tent where the monitoring station is, but from time to time he goes around patrolling the island by himself from time to time during the day. After that information, Mashima gave a farewell to Kiyotaka, but also told him to be careful as he has a bad feeling about all this. A little while after, the swimming task had come to an end, with Nanase barely getting 3rd place. This was fair after she had a long day of travel. The person who took 1st place was Class 2D's Onodera, who was a formidable opponent when it came to swimming. As for the men's size, Konji of course won that, a true freak and superhuman of a man if you will. The question is, how will Konji rise up to the challenge when the time comes? Kiyotaka thought about that very question, but for now left it, and decided to rest until the next designated area was announced. He missed 4 areas in a row, so was determined to get the 5th. The area they had to go to was B6, another random area. It was manageable, but it wouldn't be easy. The goal now was to go along the beach at D8 and C8, and then make their way to the beach at B8. Lots of 8s, right? From there they head north so they can reach the area B6. Unlike the woods, the beach was full of students, but once they turned back into the depths, that wouldn't be the same. They spoke about how there was a lot of groups in the starting area. Maybe it was due to it being the 5th day and things were starting to get stressful. They spoke a little bit more about this topic and spoke about their approaches during the exam. How would they handle things? And what could they do in certain situations overall? Kiyotaka would share some things, but it would lead to Nanase asking why he would tell her all of this. Up until now, he would try and dodge questions. Kiyotaka thought this too. The answer really was, after spending some time with her, he got to understand her. What kind of personality she had, what kind of mentality she had, who Nanase Tsubasa the honor student really was, from her academics to her physical ability. But there was one thing that was strange, that being why. Why did the girl try and get Kiyotaka expelled with Hosen? Is she the White Room student? Or maybe there's another reason. Was the reason she was insistent on following Kiyotaka so she could strike? But if that was the case, then Nanase hasn't shown even 1 ounce. She had just been helping Kiyotaka to the best of her ability. You are clearly my enemy, Nanase, he stated. Carried on saying not just in this exam, but there's a matter about the 20 million point bounty too. Yes, you're right, I did plot that against you, senpai, replied Nanase. But even still, Kiyotaka couldn't see her as an enemy, at least in some aspects. After all this, Nanase fell silent, and Kiyotaka didn't feel the need to press matters even further. After a while, they finally managed to make it to their final designated area. Nanase slumped down to the ground right on the spot, releasing a heavy sigh. She was exhausted and admitted the swimming task took a lot out of her. She probably had no energy left and was surprised as she made it. They decided to rest before pitching a tent nearby. There was a lot of space, and right before they were about to pass, one of the campers called out to them. It was Hamaguchi Tetsuya from Class 2C. He asked if they were in a hurry somewhere. Kiyotaka replied saying they weren't, and he was just thinking of heading down closer to the ocean. It led Hamaguchi to ask if they wanted to stay around for a bit. Kiyotaka was confused why he wanted to strike a conversation with him, as they never usually speak much at school, so you wouldn't really call them friends exactly. There was a little silence after, and he continued to speak. He sounded somewhat sorry and said they didn't have to force themselves. Around the same time, there was a sound of two girls talking and glancing at Kiyotaka's direction. Kiyotaka said they could leave if they weren't comfortable, but Hamaguchi insisted it wasn't that, and they just wanted to talk. He looked back at the girls and they nodded in agreement, saying it was fine if he stayed here tonight. Hamaguchi went to unzip his bag, and what behold was a bunch of canned foods peeking out. They had a card where you're able to use 1.5 times the number of points to buy stuff at the start. That's the reason for all the food. This food wouldn't be suitable for travel, so Kiyotaka assumed it was Ichinosa's idea. You could see this group as maybe the kitchen staff for Class 2C. Nanase thought the idea was interesting, being led to the same conclusion as Kiyotaka. The duo was even offered some food, but they were confused, as food is very valuable in this exam. Nanase was grateful but declined, but Hamaguchi wouldn't have it and started to prep food for them immediately. He said not to worry and it was cool as they got beef from a task today, and it wouldn't last long. They even went into the topic about Kiyotaka being the hot topic of girls when he first joined the school. I went on to talk a little longer into the night, with Nanase asking questions about how Kiyotaka had changed. Now the 6th day of the special exam, they started moving south to the first designated area of the day, B6. They even got the early bird bonus. The next was A5, in which they got the arrival bonus, and the third would be a random one at C3. They could take several routes, which was currently in A5, but Nanase opted to go through the area A4 and B4 in order to get the early bird bonus. Kiyotaka interjected saying they were going to take a somewhat riskier way, meaning the shortest path. There's no way if Nanase would be able to keep up, but of course she had a man dead set following Kiyotaka. You had to climb a cliff or pull back, those were the only two options. Nanase said she could do it, and took a band out to tie her hair, making it easier to climb. But the moment she started climbing, she came tumbling down to the ground. Thankfully she wasn't that high, so she didn't get that hurt. Guess that's it then, said Kiyotaka. The reason they were taking this route to save time, there's no point if she uses up all her energy, Kiyotaka replied, and said he was going on ahead, but if she insists on climbing and she would have to accept the responsibility for what happens herself. She'd make no attempt to hide how frustrated she was, but Kiyotaka just left her there. While climbing, he had no intention to look back, but all of a sudden he heard her behind him. She was still determined to follow him, even after all of Kiyotaka's warnings. Kiyotaka eventually decided to help her and took Nanase's hand. She was frustrated but had no choice. She asked Kiyotaka if he had experience in rock climbing, to where he said no, and thought to himself during this exam he had no time to waste, so he had to try a lot of new things he had no experience with. I see, replied Nanase. Around 10 minutes after they got to the top of the cliff, started walking once more without any time to rest. Nanase lagged behind a little but was still walking and trying to follow Kiyotaka. She was almost like a dog, he thought. Eventually they arrived at C3 and Kiyotaka managed to arrive first. After that they took a short breath and Kiyotaka felt a light breeze from time to time coming from the top of the mountain. It was quite pleasant, he thought to himself. The skies had been sunny and clear, but now the clouds are starting to set. The sky was becoming overcast. He spoke a little and Kiyotaka says he feels graduation would come before they know it, and feels it's best to spend time without any regrets. Graduation? Repeated Nanase. Something wrong? Replied Kiyotaka. He seemed to be getting a whole different vibe from Nanase now, to the Nanase he'd been used to seeing. If she had something on his mind, he would have to wait until she tells him. Now 9 PM on the 6th day of the exam. Many of the reps of the first year decided to gather in F9. From Class A there was Takahashi Omasu. From Class B there was Yagami Takia. From Class C there was Utamiya along with Tsubaki. Finally from Class D there was Hosen. Well, at least it should have been. But Hosen was nowhere to be seen at the moment. Takahashi then ran off saying he had a stomachache. From then Yagami went to have a word with Tsubaki. What? She asked. To where Yagami asked what her plan was, and if she didn't have one she wouldn't have proposed this meeting between class reps. Tsubaki just stared at him, not saying a word. Yagami said Tsubaki was the one controlling the class from the shadows, trying to get Kiyotaka expelled, while Utamiya was just the leader for show, almost like Kiyotaka and Horikita. They went back and forth a little, with Tsubaki saying she would tell Yagami something interesting, but she can't give any guarantees. He mentioned a point about them trying to get Kiyotaka expelled. He carried on saying he is probably more obsessed with ayanokoji than Ichika and Hosen. Why do you think that? He asked. He didn't stop smiling, but you could tell his face was noticeably strained. Tsubaki mentioned he wanted to get Kiyotaka closer and then stab in the back. That would be hard to imagine considering the way he normally acts. Am I wrong? She questioned. Yagami looked at her in the eyes, but Tsubaki's glare was too much, causing him to avert his gaze. Tsubaki carried on saying the situation they're in is kinda crappy right now, telling Yagami about how Nanase is with Kiyotaka and about the two of them are in Area C3, mentioning how Hosen is waiting to make his next move. Tsubaki was interested to see what ideas Yagami had to get Kiyotaka expelled. But I've told you already, I don't, he replied. She came in closer with a look of conviction, saying he may lose in a lot of ways if he doesn't show the willingness to cooperate. Adding on, someone important to him could be in danger too. You're not planning on doing something to Kushida-senpai, are? Hearing Kushida's name, the expressionless face of Tsubaki showed a faint smile. What about Kushida-senpai, she asked? Nothing. Please excuse me, said Yagami. Suddenly he was grabbed by Utomiya from behind and tried to break free, but couldn't. It was like Yagami said. Tsubaki was the one calling the shots. She told him to come clean, otherwise he would get eliminated. Yagami began to speak, but couldn't get much out. He hesitated. This caused Utomiya to drop his grip from behind, and instead go for Yagami's neck, gripping her arm around it. This is the end of the road, Yagami-kun. If you don't tell us here and now, we will go ask Kushida directly, said Tsubaki. This was no threat. Tsubaki would actually go follow through if need be. Hanging his head low, he decided to tell them everything, from Kushida's past to how Kiyotaka knew of it. By the time he was finished, Takahashi would return. Meeting ended without Hosen ever showing face. It was the 7th day of the exam. Kiyotaka had gotten a whole 76 points so far. If a 3-person group didn't do a single task and only went through designated areas, they would have around 92 points. If you were to look at it that way, then you might think Kiyotaka is in a tough spot, but it's not that simple, of course. But now Kiyotaka had rose to 55th place in the overall rankings. Again, you can't really predict how things will go during this exam, nor how your own body will hold up. The stress and exhaustion it brings is another thing, what continues to build up, not going away anytime soon. But for Kiyotaka, he had managed to conserve his energy, just as he planned, and was even in the same physical condition as the first day. He was ready to take it up a notch and kick it into high gear going into the second half of the exam. Even Konji didn't show signs of slowing down. He's behind Nagamo's group in the spot of number 2 by only 8 points. As for another second year group, ryuuen and Katsudaki were at 9th place. It was around 6:50, and Kiyotaka noticed Nanase, who was normally up in the morning, was nowhere to be seen. Was she sleeping? Or maybe there was a slight change in her condition. If there was, you couldn't really blame her. After all, she had been pushing herself to the limit. He went to his tent to grab his tablet, heard Nanase emerge from her tent. Kiyotaka asked if she was okay. She replied saying she was and there was no problems whatsoever. From what Kiyotaka saw, there wasn't any signs of fatigue in her words or action, but her eyes had slight bags, meaning she might have not slept too well. As for the first year, there was Utomiya and Yagami's group, who was in 7th place the day before but have now risen to 6th. As for the third year students, there are students from every class, from class A to class D in the top 10. The good weather they were blessed with for the 6 days would not continue. They would be different. Smoke-coloured clouds. It could drop with rain at any instant. From the report, they still had around 2 to 3 hours until then. Kiyotaka hadn't spent a single point buying things for weather like this. He would have to deal with the added weight rain brings. For now, he decided to go to the first designated area of the day, somewhere close to C3. But right before he shut off his tablet, he saw a message pop up, showing the movement system and tasks may be suspended depending on weather condition, and to check tablets regularly. This could be bad for lower ranked students. Kiyotaka thought the school weren't going to make a final decision until the final minute. It was time to head out. Kiyotaka began to walk and Nanase was staring off into space. He called for her and she realized she was behind. You could tell between yesterday and today she was different. I couldn't imagine she had come into contact with a third party. A little while after, Kiyotaka managed to get the early bird bonus at his designated area, but there weren't many tasks nearby, so they decided to kill some time. After a while, the next designated area was announced, that being a random one at E2. What's considerably close for being a random one, they'd have to cross the mountains in areas D2 and D3 to get there the quickest. But it looked like any second the weather could take a turn for the worse. They talked about what to do. Nanase mentioned she would like to cross the mountains. Kiyotaka warned her of them losing their footing due to it being wet. Even Kiyotaka couldn't say he wasn't afraid of slipping and falling. Nanase mentioned they should make a mad dash before it starts raining and get another bonus. Kiyotaka thought all this time Nanase would never once make a complaint. Kiyotaka would be fine for usually letting her go, but it could be dangerous in this situation, and he may never find an answer on why she was joining him during this exam if he was to let her go now. Alright, said Kiyotaka, and I don't know if that's what she's prepared to do, he will go with her. Thank you very much, she replied. Hearing her voice, Kiyotaka knew she was totally confident that he would join her. They decided to get going immediately, and walked east for a while before the wind picked up, and blew more forcefully around the same time. The sky turned a darker grey. It could really start raining at any point. They were about to reach D3. Kiyotaka could hear Nanase's breath slightly behind it. He wondered if this was a result of the fatigue building up over the past few days. He decided to slow down his pace ever so slightly so she wouldn't notice. If he was to slow down any further, even Kiyotaka knew he'd have to stop this journey now. The path they were taking really wasn't meant for the running shoes they were both wearing. As they took more and more steps, Nanase's pace steadily decreased. He stopped and asked Nanase to give her backpack, but she insisted to keep it. After some back and forth, he finally got it off her, and it weighed around the same as his. "Are you really alright, senpai?" Nanase asked. "Walk first, then talk," he replied. Nanase took that warning and shut her mouth and started walking almost exactly 2 meters behind him. The surroundings grew dimmer and dimmer, and even the wind had gotten stronger. The good news was they had almost reached the top. Nanase, seeming to recover, got her backpack from Kiyotaka. Instead of putting it over her back, she just took it with both hands and simply stared at it. "Hey, you ready to start walking?" questioned Kiyotaka. No response. This was strange for someone who wanted to reach a destination quickly. "Ayanokoji senpai, there's something I'd like to ask you," said Nanase. Kiyotaka explained it seemed like she had something on her mind since the morning, adding it was written all over her face. To be more specific, when she asked to accompany him, it seemed like she had something she wanted to say. "I knew it. You saw right through me after all, huh?" said Nanase, who didn't really sound too shocked and just nodded as she spoke. She continued, saying there was a reason she stuck with him the past few days. She stood there, not moving an inch, and began to explain. She then said she would like to say sorry for one thing, and placed her backpack down next to a large tree. And carried on. "You won't be reaching your next designated area today, senpai," Kiyotaka replied, ruling it off as a joke, calling it funny. Nanase saying she wanted to cross the mountains to lead them here. The place they are at now was the northern part of D3, Nanase's true destination. It seems they are the only 2 people there as of now. She then spoke more to Kiyotaka, saying he has made many friends at this school, gained a fair bit of trust, added he is someone who should not be at this school, but Nanase before him began to change. This was not the same person from a few days ago. "I shouldn't?" questioned Kiyotaka, asking Nanase to give him a reason. She nodded and slowly stood back up before turning around to look at him. "Because you're from the White Room." Those words leaving Nanase's mouth. A phrase what was known by few people at the school. She was there to get him expelled and sent by Sakishido. "I'm going to knock you here and injure you, setting off your emergency alert," she told him, causing his expulsion. Kiyotaka then asked if she was the one who injured Komiya and Kinoshita. He tried to get out of it by any way, asking questions. It would seem like there was an answer for everything. This wouldn't end with a cute childish squabble. It would lead to the 2 probably trading punches. Kiyotaka couldn't afford to lose. He said Kiyotaka's only option would be to leave his bag. If he was to do that, he would be leaving both his tent and his tablet. Boy Kiyotaka ayanokoji had but one choice. He faced Nanase, showing his resolve to fight. She mentioned if she was to lose, that means he does too. Nanase took an orthodox approach and began to move. She kicked off the ground and closed the distance between them in one go. Was she going to strike with her arms? Or her legs? Or maybe even both? Kiyotaka wanted to analyze the fight style. If he was to seriously injure Nanase, that might put him at a disadvantage. Not only that, but it was obvious that someone else was watching them, as Kiyotaka felt another presence in the distance the whole time. This person was probably used to gather evidence for Kiyotaka if he was to injure Nanase. So there was only one choice. Nanase made a feint with her left and reached straight for Kiyotaka with an outstretched arm. She didn't throw a closed fist, but instead a gentle open palm. Kiyotaka outpaced Nanase's arm, but extended his own, avoiding her, and aimed for her eyes, stopping his tight clenched fist 1 centimeter before Nanase's very eyes. This caused Nanase's body to unconsciously stiffen up as a result of the threat of impact. "That's 1, said Kiyotaka. If he really decided to hit her, the fight would be over then and there, and Nanase wouldn't be standing right now, and added her true potential should be greater than this. Nanase then asked Kiyotaka if he could beat her without even trying, pulled back his fist without even answering Nanase's question. His response caused her to retreat. The gap between them was now 2 meters, and once again Nanase kicked off, and instead lowered her upper body, just like she'd been planning to come up with her uppercut. Kiyotaka dodged right before her attack landed, aimed the big punch straight at Nanase's cheek, but just like before, stopped 1 centimeter before it hit her. "That makes 2, said Kiyotaka. Her eyes were glued onto the fist that could have hit her. She said he is free to show dominance, but he doesn't stand a chance of winning if he doesn't fight back. Not only that, but Nanase was showing her true strength here. It was like she was trying to see Kiyotaka's moves before attacking. On the attack again, she grabbed a hold of Kiyotaka's right arm, and it was like she wanted to pull him down to the ground. But instead, Kiyotaka resisted. "You're not budging?" Thrown off by this, she was shaken and flustered. Kiyotaka then took this chance to attack. He swung his left fist, ripping through the air, and stopped it 1 centimeter before it hit Nanase in the jaw. The force of Kiyotaka's very punch made Nanase's hair flutter in the wind. Again, she stared at his fist with open eyes and turned to face him. "That makes 3 times now, said Kiyotaka. "It would seem you are truly as capable as the rumors say, Ayanokoji-senpai," she replied. Nanase had passion and even hatred in her eyes as she looked at the man across from her. "I suppose I probably cannot defeat you," Nanase said. There was a pause. A moment of peace. But not for long. Soon after, Nanase came back charging at Kiyotaka, lunging in at a high speed without making a sound. Kiyotaka was forced to make an emergency evasive move. Nanase's moves were 2 times as fast as before. She was staring daggers at him like she could kill a person. The person speaking now was completely different. "Who are you?" Kiyotaka would ask. He couldn't help but say this in this situation. "I've come back from that place," replied Nanase, and added on, "to stop you." "That place?" Kiyotaka questioned in his head. He thought it may have been the White Room, but that wasn't it. Nanase began to speak again. "I've come back from that dark place." Not even Kiyotaka could understand what was going on. What was she talking about? What place was this? Even her fighting style alone and her speech was different. Kiyotaka continued to dodge, what led Nanase to yell, asking if he thinks he can dodge forever. She was convinced she would hit him eventually. And if you were a spectator in this fight, you would probably think the same. Nanase let out a battle cry. She was becoming out of breath as she continued her onslaught. She then put some distance between them and tried to center herself. I will definitely defeat you." She repeated this over and over again. "I've come back to defeat you," she added. "Come back? What are you talking about?" asked Kiyotaka. Nanase then said it makes sense he doesn't understand. After all, they have never met in person. Kiyotaka couldn't imagine someone from the White Room holding a grudge against him. Was Nanase really from the White Room? She had taken only less than 20 seconds to catch her breath. But that was enough. She began to attack once more. A thin and pale arm came at Kiyotaka. Even her fist grazed his bangs. The girl in front of him still looked like Nanase, but it was like her mind belonged to another. He thought about it longer and wondered. Multiple personalities? Or the real term, identity disorder, what causes a person to have several personalities within one single individual. If Nanase truly had this, then it would become a simple thing to explain. Like the Nanase who spoke different could have a superior physical ability compared to her original personality. "You don't seem like Nanase," Kiyotaka said out loud. Hearing that, she stopped dead in her tracks. "You still don't understand, do you?" replied Nanase, glaring at him with her voice shaking. She added on saying, "The one before him isn't Nanase, but Matsuro Eiichiro." "Matsuro Eiichiro?" Kiyotaka questioned. Kiyotaka heard this name once before. From who, you might ask? "That man, Kiyotaka's father. The son of the man who was killed by Kiyotaka's father," said Nanase, infuriated. And added on saying she borrowed his body to defeat him right now. A funny joke, Kiyotaka thought. Nanase replied saying if you think that's a joke, then to try her, and kick her off the ground once more, yelling she was here to defeat him. "I'll make you pay," she shouted. Nanase had gotten sharper, but Kiyotaka still wouldn't let himself get hit that easily. She was close to her limit. Kiyotaka asked if she had multiple personalities, but Kiyotaka couldn't believe this. It made zero sense. Nanase would ask how it's possible for them to be there then. "How?" Kiyotaka questioned. "You made it up," he answered. "Even the way you speak," he mentioned. She made it all up to convince herself. "His power is proof alone," said Nanase, throwing another punch as forceful and faster as another. Kiyotaka replied saying she was always capable from the start. She was shaken. "You're wrong," she said. "I'm Eiichiro," she shouted. If she really was this person, then she wouldn't be upset by what Kiyotaka was saying. Nanase kept saying Kiyotaka was wrong and yelling whilst doing so. She screamed and lunged right before him. The strength and sharpness from before was now gone. Kiyotaka could dodge this with his eyes closed if he wanted to. "Give up, Nanase," he said. "You can't beat me," he added. "I will. I have to," she shouted, and then grabbed Kiyotaka's collar and swung her right arm back, going for his face, but even still, Kiyotaka dodged. The first, the second, the third, the fourth, and even the fifth. Kiyotaka dodged every attack. Nanase, fed up, tried to grab Kiyotaka by the hair, but he grabbed her right wrist. "Let me go," she yelled. Kiyotaka explained if he did, it wouldn't change anything. Once again she screamed, saying to let her go. The cycle once again continued. Nanase kept throwing punch after punch and missed again and again. She had reached her limit, both physically and mentally. Knees trembling, she started to move forward, but her body refused to fight any longer. Kiyotaka spoke a little, saying she would have attacked until she died. He was bluffing, of course, but she would have never even hit Kiyotaka once. He carried on saying if she really wanted to get him expelled, then her best bet was to go to the teacher, saying she got attacked by him. It was like deep down she didn't want to get him expelled. Nanase let out a scream and fell to her knees on the spot. The girl's spirit was now broken. On the 5th day of the exam, in the perspective of another student, they met up with a lone first year student, that being the leader of Class 1B, Yagami. They would ask him to explain himself after being spoken to over a walkie-talkie this morning. His eyes averted their gaze and he spoke. "Unexpected things do tend to happen, Kushida-senpai." "What do you mean unexpected things?" Kushida said, snapping, mentioning it's his fault that other students found out about her past. Yagami had contacted Kushida saying he made a confession telling some other students about her past. He apologized, but that wouldn't change anything in this situation. Now there was 4 more people who knew the truth about Kushida. He told Kushida to calm down, and that's not what's important right now, and the objective was to get Kiyotaka expelled right now, and they have no interest in Kushida's past. Kushida said not to make a laugh and saying they're in a grade battle. Yagami tried to counter, but this led to Kushida arguing back, asking if he was giving her lip. He said sorry once again and added he felt like he made the best choice. Kushida thought to herself, how is this the best decision? After all, he just blabbed his mouth about her past. She had reached her limit. Yagami insisted that she could recover from this, but Kushida said it was already too late. He then brought up nanase and how she was with Kiyotaka. Kushida wondered if she also knew, but Yagami assured her she didn't. Of course, Kushida couldn't trust him anymore. She then asked what nanase and Hosen had planned in specific. Violence, he answered, talking about how Tsukishiro mentioned minor disputes would be allowed. He mentioned it wouldn't be Hosen who'd confront Kiyotaka this time, but instead nanase, saying if he was to hit her back then it might not end well for him. Kushida explained saying they didn't know when this fight would happen. But that was wrong. Yagami indeed did know when it would happen. A certain someone told him about the plan. He couldn't say who, but said they were trustworthy. He carried on saying their tablets could record video. If they were to get the video of Kiyotaka doing something, they could get him expelled. Yagami then wanted Kushida to take this risk. The reason for this was because she was a girl and nobody would blame her for sitting back and recording. Kushida would also have the question if one of her classmates found out. Then it may say she sold out one of her own. Yagami would then reply saying she could just give the evidence to him, and he would say he got it from an anonymous source. They agreed and decided on the day they would keep in contact through radio, and he would give Kiyotaka's location. You will do this for me, won't you, Kushida-senpai? Said Yagami. I really don't have any choice, replied Kushida. She was cornered and couldn't afford to make any more mistakes at this school. Oof, this is bad, said Ichinose. Around 7 in the morning in the perspective of Ichinose, cloudy skies were forming. It could rain at any moment. Ichinose was looking down at her watch. She fell by the river earlier and broke her watch, hitting it against the rock. Ichinose decided to head back to the port and apologized, saying she would be back for the third area. Shibata would accompany her. After an hour of walking, they were at E9 along the river. Even if they took their time, it would take less than 30 minutes to get there. Ichinose convinced Shibata to head for the third area. As she passed along, she didn't see anyone in the area, so she assumed that she was alone. She was walking in a straight line, but dense trees blocked her path. If one was blocked, she took another, again and again. Why does it feel like everything is going really badly for some reason, she said out loud. Then questioned what she was even doing. She felt like she had gotten lost and was unsure on what to do. Ichinose wasn't the type to make rash decisions, but ever since being demoted to Class C, she was feeling impatient, struggling with the feelings inside of her. Just then she heard a faint noise. She nearly gave in to letting out a shout of joy. She walked into the direction and was met by the sight of Tsukishiro along with Shiba, the homeroom teacher for Class 1D. Choosing not to ask for directions, she decided to follow them, but far enough so she wouldn't be seen. She then heard a voice. They were talking about a situation and how Mashima was wary of them. She wasn't interested in eavesdropping, so she was only half paying attention to what they were saying. Then they brought up Kiyotaka, to where Ichinose clicked, and her heart began to pound from hearing that name. She tried to listen closely from them. Will it really be that easy to get him expelled? I mean, he's the White Room's... White Room, she questioned. She couldn't hear everything, but the words ayanokoji and expulsion struck her head, and they couldn't get out. She wondered why the acting director Tsukishiro would be speaking of this. She heard a little more, then Tsukishiro shot a sharp glance behind him. This caused Ichinose to run, but the weight of her backpack stopped her from picking up speed. She took it off and hurled it into the bush. Ichinose was certain she heard something she wasn't supposed to. I'm sure I can get away, she repeated over and over again in her head. She could hear quick footsteps behind her, so she carried on running. Eventually Ichinose's leg got caught, and this caused her to fall. Just as she got up, a large hand grasped her shoulder. It was Shiba, who knew who she was. Why are you here, he asked. Where Ichinose replied saying she just wanted to get a watch looked at. Shiba continued saying that was why no GPS signals were in the area. And even if she heard 1% of their conversation, then it means she was simply unlucky. You mean I'm going to be penalized, she replied. Shiba mentioned saying it had nothing to do with school rules, and his hand drew closer to Ichinose. Tsukishiro cut him off saying he shouldn't use such a violent method, then turned to Ichinose with an unsettling grin and asked what she heard. I didn't hear anything, she said. It was a lie, but they weren't going to believe her one bit, and they didn't. Perhaps we should hurt you so you no longer remember Ichinose-san, said Tsukishiro. Seeing her shiver, Tsukishiro smiled, and added if she tells anyone he will see it that a group from Class 2C is eliminated from the exam. Ichinose was shocked, but Tsukishiro told no lies. His eyes even asked her if she understood, and then he asked Shiba what he would do in this situation. Shiba then did something weird. He pulled out a pair of rubber gloves from his pocket and put them on, his response being that he would dispose of her if the matter was left to him. The only thing Ichinose could do was watch in fear as they decided her fate. Ichinose couldn't imagine what Shiba was going to do after putting on those gloves. Then Tsukishiro looked at her again with a smile and told her the port was 150 meters ahead and to get going. She quickly put on her bag and left with a bow, leaving as fast as she could. They decided to leave her, and Tsukishiro mentioned the fact that unexpected things happen all the time, and they just have to adapt. He was 99% sure Nanase would fail, but if everything goes well, Kiyotaka's emergency alert would go off at any moment. You could see these two will do anything to succeed, even if it means dumping the body of a high school girl. Thankfully, today wasn't that day for Ichinose. The rain started to pour harder and harder. Back with Kiyotaka and Nanase, they began to speak with each other. Nanase had admitted defeat. He asked if she could tell him everything in detail. She obliged. Not only that, she actually wanted him to know. She wanted to avenge her childhood friend, that being none other than Matsuo Eiichiro, the son of the butler who took care of Kiyotaka, as you remember in Volume 7. She realized there was no way Kiyotaka could have known what happened to him after coming to the school, and seeing how you can't communicate with the outside while at the school. Nanase then told Kiyotaka everything. How he got kicked out of high school due to Kiyotaka's father. No matter how hard he tried to escape, he would always meet the same fate. She mentioned she knew him from kindergarten all the way to junior high. They were best friends. Even after the boy got kicked out of his home, he said he wouldn't give up and started working. He just kept smiling, even though he lost his father. The boy always gave it his best, never gave up. But after visiting him, Nanase saw the unexpected. She didn't expect the boy who was trying so hard to end his own life. Nanase would never get to express how she felt about Eiichiro, ever. So after that, Tsukishiro appeared. So Kiyotaka was the one to blame for Eiichiro losing his life, and promised if she got him expelled, she would see Kiyotaka's father. What Nanase planned to do was make him bow his head and apologize for what happened to Eiichiro. Even Kiyotaka knew that man would never do something like that. There were still some things Kiyotaka was unsure about, like the White Room student. He asked Nanase about this, and she replied saying she didn't know much about this White Room. Kiyotaka thought of two possibilities now. One being that the White Room student was actually another person, the one sent after him was Nanase. Or the other being that Tsukishiro lied, and he wanted Kiyotaka to assume there was a White Room student. If that was the case, then nobody else would be after him. Nanase then said it wasn't Kiyotaka's fault, she just wanted to take her anger out on somebody. She hid her face as she couldn't face it, and she was truly sorry, she said, and thought that man committed a grave sin trying to bring him back. Nanase she could at least drop out to make amends for what she had done. Kiyotaka thought to himself, that being him and that man were the same. They could protect themselves, they didn't care what happened to others. But they were different in some aspects. Offering a hand to a fool was something that man would never do, but for Kiyotaka it was different. He offered his hand to Nanase, and told her if she really is sorry then to take back what she said. What do you mean, she replied, and told her she had nothing to be ashamed of. There was a reason he couldn't lose too, and added saying by staying at the school he could attack his father. Nanase didn't lift her head to look him in the eye, but slowly lifted enough to see his palm, and he asked if he could say something selfish, and carried on, saying he doesn't want Nanase to leave the school. Mentioned getting him expelled would counter Eiichiro's wishes. So you're saying I should have done the opposite of what I was doing? She questioned. Kiyotaka then took Nanase's hand. It's a promise, she replied. Kiyotaka then thought he had to make good use of her, even if she was ultimately used up and disregarded. He told her to get up as she would get sick if she carried on sitting here in the rain longer, and the two went off. With that, we end the volume with an image of Kiyotaka reaching out to Nanase, but a figure in the back holding a branch, ready to attack. Anyways, that wraps up Year 2, Volume 3 of COTE. I'm back. Y'all miss me? It took a whole 7 months to come out, but let's explain why it took a whole 7 months to come out after I said it would have taken like a week or two. I'm probably going into more detail in my update video, so stay tuned for that. But long story short, I was burnt out. The boy was going through some stuff, and whenever I went to go work on the script of a video, which I did start in August last year, surprisingly, I started this script in August last year. It has like 29,000 words, and I finished it the night before I'm recording this, so I finished the script on like the 6th of February, right? And I was like, every time I went to go work on the script, I felt sick. I felt like throwing up. I felt depressed. I felt upset, and it wasn't because of the series. I mean, EK doesn't upset me that much, right? But yeah. It's essentially like that, and like, trust me, I'm not upset anymore. Like, your boy's good. It took a while, it took 7 months, but I'm okay now. And I want to promise y'all, I'm back. I am back. I've snapped out of this mood, and I'm ready to go for this year, bro. I have a goal for this year. I'm trying to go for 50k. You know, I'm keeping it a little bit quiet, but y'all know first. We're gonna see if we can make it to 50k. Really, like, I'm gonna work really hard, trying to at least get a video, at least the 1 Cote video a month, maybe 2. I think the reason I did it burnt out before was like because I kept doing 2 a month, but we're going to mix in a lot of other light novel series too, and a lot of other manga series. I'm excited for 2023 overall. With that said, let's go for 1k likes, I guess. You know, that's a pretty nice one. I'm not sure if like any of y'all are still here, but you know, I'm gonna try my best. Let's go for 1k likes. And with that said, stay tuned for the update video and take a peep at my next Cote video coming soon.